Welcome to Fusion Fantasies, where I turn the light novels I love into audiobooks free, copyright safe, and made for you to enjoy. No frills, just stories. Got a novel in mind? Drop your suggestions, and it might just become the next audiobook. Now, let's dive in. 61 Chapter 61. Such an attitude made everyone's heart pound and they felt uneasy. The leader was a wealthy merchant. He did not kneel on the ground. At this moment, he was standing at the very front and facing the long-bearded man with great pressure. Faced with such a threat, he had no choice but to put in a good word. "Sir, you are right. This surname you was indeed thoughtless and offended you. Since this is your first offense, I won't hold it against you." The long-bearded man frowned. "Leave quickly. If you come to cause trouble again, don't blame me for being merciless." The wealthy merchant looked at the long saber at his waist and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. However, he still braced himself and said, "Your lordship, it's not that I don't trust the soldiers and His Highness the 18th Prince. It's just that I'm a merchant, I rely on the few goods at home to support my family. Now, I can't even sell them in Glory City, I can't even exchange a bag of food for them. The beast tide can last for a few months at least or half a year at most. If it continues like this, even if our entire family doesn't die in the mouths of mutated beasts, I'm afraid we'll starve to death at home." The long-bearded man was calm and collected. "Don't worry, I've long given the order to prepare and store food for the citizens of the city. When the time comes, we'll naturally not forget your portion. Although the quota is a little low and the ingredients aren't that exquisite, it's enough for your daily needs, you won't starve to death." As he spoke, the man went up and patted the rich merchant's shoulder. He smiled faintly and said, "Glory City is the place where you were born and raised, your ancestors have lived here for generations. If you leave this place when it needs you the most, even if you can live a rich life in the future, can you sleep peacefully at night?" The rich merchant's expression froze. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. When He Chuan heard this, the inference system actually automatically activated and paired with the heavenly buff, it gave him two results. Let the people leave, the law of karma can be activated, all the gold is gone. The reward received for distributing wealth, rich merchant's reward. Do not let the people leave, no reward, waiting for the next opportunity to be triggered. He Chuan's eyes lit up slightly. It was really like giving a pillow when one was dozing off, giving him whatever he wanted. He did not expect that this would trigger the effect of the law of karma. As expected of the heavenly law. It seemed like everything in the city was determined to be his wealth. As long as there were expenses, there would be compensation. Although after these merchants left, it would be difficult to open up the trade routes in the city, perhaps the lives of the people would be even more difficult. But there were more urgent matters at hand, and he had to distinguish between priorities. If the business collapsed, it could still be rebuilt, but if all the people died, then the city would have no value. Thus, He Chuan immediately went forward. He said lightly, "Let them go." The long-bearded man was first enraged when he heard the voice. Who the F***ck would be so blind at this time to dare to challenge him? In the end, he turned his head to look. He saw a handsome youth slowly walking over. His expression instantly changed, and he hurriedly knelt down on one knee to pay his respects. "Your Highness! Your subordinate did not welcome you at such a distance. Please atone for my sins." When the surrounding commoners heard this form of address, they were all shocked. Their bodies, which were already kneeling, buried their heads down, almost prostrating themselves on the ground. The wealthy merchant who was not kneeling was also shocked. He looked around, and then without hesitation, he imitated the commoners and made the same gesture, showing respect and submission. He Chuan saw this. It seemed like the old feudal dynasty had not changed. "All of you, get up, there's no need to kneel. All of you are born equal. No matter who you are facing, you should maintain your dignity." He Chuan waved his hand, go back to what you were doing. If you want to leave, go ahead. Survival is the most important thing. Everyone was dumbfounded. Your Highness, what are you talking about? Equality? Dignity? These words made the beggars even more convincing. In front of you, how could we dare to have dignity? Do we want to die? Wait. I think they were even allowed to leave. Is this for real? It can't be, right? He didn't even mention a single request, and he was so straightforward. At this moment, both sides fell silent. The commoners felt that He Chuan was fishing for a way to enforce the law. After they left, they would let the long-bearded man lead the troops and use the excuse of running away. But they didn't dare to ask. As commoners, they were still unspeakably reserved and uncomfortable when facing the nobles. As for the long-bearded man, he wasn't sure what to do. They didn't know if the prince was sending him a message or if he really thought so. Sigh. Annoying. As expected of a man who had once been the crown prince. His words and actions were so hard to understand. Just when everyone couldn't figure it out, He Chuan spoke again. This time, he directly made it clear. He told everyone that he couldn't resist the beast tide. This prince's identity was in name only. He didn't have any power or influence. Coming here was actually no different from waiting for death. If everyone wanted to live, they had to leave this place and find a way to Freedom City, which was close to the border of the country. Only then would there be a chance of survival. These words were very sincere, and many people were moved. Because it was just as He Chuan had said. The size of Freedom City was much larger than Glory City. Moreover, its geographical location was very special. It was close to 3 countries. It became a necessary place for merchant caravans to pass through. Because the sky was high and the emperor was far away, even the central officials could not get information about Freedom City in real time. So the local people were allowed to govern themselves. Over time, it formed a very free business atmosphere. No matter who it was, they could live in Freedom City. They did not need identification. They would not ask you where you came from. As long as you had money, you could have a warm little nest there. Because of this, Freedom City became a sacred place where all the countries put out bounties on criminals. Any country in the world would reject a wanted criminal? It didn't matter. Just came to Freedom City. However, Freedom City was a mix of fish and dragons, it had all kinds of people. However, this wasn't a bad thing. What came with it was extremely strong strength. In the past, when the beast tide had invaded, all the citizens of Freedom City had become soldiers. In order to protect the only pure land that could survive, the wanted criminals had all stepped onto the battlefield. That reckless fighting style had caused heavy losses to the strange beasts that had come to invade. Later on, the trading firm had invested in upgrading the defensive equipment in the city, turning Freedom City into an iron wall. Other than the birds and beasts that could fly into the city, the other strange beasts were completely helpless. Such a powerful city defense could be said to be the best of the few kingdoms. If they could get there before the beast tide arrived, it would definitely be much safer than staying in Glory City. Unfortunately, they had to pass through many mountains and hills along the way. They would definitely encounter many strange beasts. These existences could only be dealt with by awakened ones. As long as they were unlucky enough to encounter one in the wild, even 10 burly men wouldn't be enough to defeat it. This was everyone's concern. The wealthy merchant also brought it up at the right time. To show the difficulties of their group, He Chuan immediately waved his hand. No worries. I have a way to avoid the strange beasts, just do as I say. Now, call those who are qualified to live in the Freedom City over. The wealthy merchant hesitated, he still didn't feel safe. He Chuan chuckled, don't worry, I have no interest in using you or finding trouble with you. To take a step back, with my status, is there a need to take so many detours when I want to do something? The rich businessman thought so. Without hesitation, he immediately asked his subordinates to inform the others in the city to come over. 62 Chapter 62. When they heard that there was a chance to live, everyone became highly effective and efficient. The long-bearded man had brought out a chair from the residence and came to He Chuan's side with a flattering expression. "Your Highness, are you really going to let these people out?" "Of course." He Chuan glanced at him. "Who are you?" "This subordinate is Su Ke, the chief of the military staff of Glory City." "Your Highness, I went to pick you up when you came last night, have you forgotten?" "Yes, I remember, what's the matter?" "Forgive me for being blunt, these are the rich people of Glory City and control more than 80% of the industry resources in the city. If you let them go just like that, the city will definitely be short of resources. When that time comes." Su Ke paused for a moment. He believed that even if he did not explain clearly, the prince would understand what he was trying to say. As long as these people were all captured, all their assets would be confiscated. The chances of fighting against the beast tide would increase by a few points. Although it was somewhat immoral, as long as the city was defended, it was worth it to bear this bit of blame. In the end, He Chuan shook his head gently. "No need, just do as I say. Don't touch a single cent of their assets. Later, get someone to lead the team and send them out." Su Ke was stunned for a moment. "Your Highness, I didn't hear wrongly, right? You still want to send someone to send them to Freedom City?" Because he was too shocked, he spoke very loudly, causing the group of people, including the wealthy merchants, to look over. He Chuan looked at him with a faint smile. "Is there a problem?" "No. No." Su Ke was instantly terrified. He didn't dare to say anything else, afraid that he would be called out to send those merchants out of the city later. This wasn't a good thing. If he encountered a strange beast, he would definitely die. When the wealthy merchant heard this, he was also greatly shocked. The people were even more astonished. They never would have thought that the city lord He Chuan would actually dispatch a portion of the city guards to escort them to Freedom City when the beast tide arrived. He was the prince, the ruler of Glory City, a high and mighty figure. In this kind of crisis, shouldn't everyone be ordered to defend the city to the death to protect his interests? Shouldn't he make an example of the others and punish anyone who dared to leave the city? Even though everyone was in a state of panic, as long as you gave the order to strictly guard the city, who would dare to leave? Who could leave? The wealthy merchants sighed. Although this new city lord came from the royal family, his kind heart was truly rare. In this chaotic and materialistic era, selfishness was the benchmark for everyone. No one was willing to give up their own interests to seek the safety of others. Today, he saw one. Unfortunately, after the beast tide, it will no longer exist. Along with Glory City, which had experienced countless tribulations, it will become dust in history. Sigh. The wealthy merchant sighed softly and looked at He Chuan with a hint of gratitude and regret. Not long after, more than 1,000 people gathered outside the city lord's residence. He Chuan immediately told them about the method to avoid the strange beasts. This was a trick that had been verified by the deductive system. Although there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be attacked by the strange beasts along the way, the safety index was definitely much higher than when they rushed all the way to Freedom City. Everyone listened very seriously and wrote everything down with a pen and paper to prevent them from forgetting. After he finished explaining all the details, He Chuan began to arrange for everyone to leave the city. If you all go out together, the commotion will be too great and it will easily alert the beast tide. First, split up into groups and leave the city in batches. Including the soldiers that are escorting you, each group cannot exceed 10 people. Leave the city in batches and leave at intervals. If you meet each other on the road, don't stay too long and spread out as much as possible. Act according to the method that I have taught you. Everyone nodded. All right, go back and prepare. He Chuan looked at Su Ke, go and make arrangements. Open the 4 city gates and let them go in different directions to divert the time. Yes. Your Highness. Suke received the order and left. There were more than 1,000 people outside the city lord's mansion. In fact, including the family members, there would be even more. Perhaps it would exceed 5 figures. Therefore, it was very difficult to arrange the trip. He Chuan could not handle it by himself. He needed help. Of course, he was not idle either. When Suke went to do things, he followed him in secret to see if he had tampered with his orders. After observing him for a period of time and seeing that he was lying on the rocking chair and doing his best to send his subordinates, He Chuan was basically certain that this person was not the crown prince's spy here. He could trust him. Although Glory City belonged to him, the people here did not have a good impression of him. From the commoners to the commanders of the army that guarded the city, none of them were familiar with him. The most important thing now was to gain the people's hearts, build a good relationship with these officials, and develop them into his trusted aides. As for their character, he would think about it later. The concentration of power was the most important thing. He Chuan knew very well that he could not command this group of people just by relying on his identity as a city lord and the title of Viscount. He had to do something that could conquer them. Therefore, at night, when the matter of leaving the city had come to an end, He Chuan called Suke over and asked him to bring a group of people to accompany him on his patrol in the city. It was already winter, and the cold wind was piercing to the bone. Suke wrapped his thick robe tightly and could not help but shiver. Looking at He Chuan who was walking in front, he could not help but complain. "Your Highness, let's go back, it's too cold outside, your body is made of 10,000 gold. If anything happens to you in the cold, even if your subordinate dies 10,000 times, it will not be enough. There are soldiers guarding the city walls at all times. No birds nor beasts will fly into the city to hurt people. Are you very cold?" He Chuan asked casually. "Yes." Suke pretended to be miserable and sniffled, "I'm almost freezing to death." "If you're cold, those people are even colder." He Chuan did not look at him. His eyes stopped at a few houses that had lights. "Let's go and have a look." Suke followed reluctantly. The house they were going to was very small and old. A corner of the window was broken, and the wind was blowing into it. Looking through the broken window, they saw 2 elderly couples huddling together in a corner, covering their bodies with straw to keep them warm. The source of the light was a half-broken candle, which was placed on the ground next to them. They could clearly see that they were only wearing thin clothes on their thatched bodies. Every time the wind blew, their bodies could not help but tremble. At this time, they could only use their hands to protect the candle. While blocking the wind, they greedily absorbed the tiny trace of heat. He Chuan frowned deeply. After a few seconds of silence, he left without looking back. Suke and the others quickly followed, feeling uneasy. 63 Chapter 63. He was a little flustered. To be honest, he wasn't moved at all when he saw this scene. But this prince in front of him couldn't be certain. He had lived in luxury since he was young and had lived in the most affluent imperial city for many years. It was impossible for him to have seen such a scene. With his shallow understanding of the prince, he would definitely be kind-hearted and unable to bear it. When the time came, who would be the one to vent their anger? It would be him. He might even be punished for his mismanagement. But could this be blamed on him? These people looked miserable, but in reality, they were the true portrayal of the people at the bottom. It was nothing out of the ordinary. In any other city, there were many more families like this. However, the blame that he had imagined did not come. Although He Chuan's expression looked a little grave, his tone was still calm as he asked, "Suke, how are the supplies in the city now?" Suke answered in fear and trepidation, "There are not many reserves in the military camp, barely enough for the soldiers to survive the winter. We haven't had time to investigate the other places yet. If nothing goes wrong, most of them should have been taken away by the merchants." I understand. He Chuan nodded slowly. Work hard tonight, ask the brothers to go to the warehouse in my mansion to take out dry firewood and charcoal. Send some to each house. We'll search the entire city tomorrow to determine the specific amount of reserves. Your Highness, you're not thinking of taking care of the civilians in G City, are you? Su Ke said tentatively, forgive me for being blunt, but it's already good enough that we can survive this winter. If we forcefully take care of these lowlifes, perhaps we won't even have to wait for the beast tide. Everyone will freeze to death and starve to death. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Take it from the people and use it for the people. If you're not willing to do it, step down yourself, I'll choose someone else. He Chuan frowned, showing his might without being angry. The domineering aura of an emperor from his previous life could not help but be released. Su Ke did not dare to say anything else. At the same time, he could not help but sigh in his heart. As expected of someone who had once been the crown prince. It was really rare to have such an imposing manner at such a young age. There was no more talk. He accepted the order and left, beginning to send his subordinates to do this matter. When the people successively received such warmth in the biting cold winter, they were all very surprised. No one had expected that the new city lord, who was a noble, would actually care about their lives and give out such precious resources. Although the amount was not much, it was enough for them to barely survive the night. However, this goodwill was silently engraved in their hearts. The impression of the people has increased. The final evaluation point has increased slightly. When He Chuan heard the news from the reincarnation seal, he knew that he did not do anything wrong. This was the right direction. The next morning, Su Ke appeared at the gate of the city lord's mansion and reported to him excitedly, as if something good had happened. Your Highness! The goods in the city have been counted. Tell me about it. Hehe, it's all on the list. Su Ke took out a piece of origami paper from his pocket and handed it over, take a look. He Chuan received it and took a look. The first half was a letter, and the second half was a list of goods. Those merchants are really hiding deep. Su Ke rubbed his hands and smiled, they didn't even tell me that they left something for you. If we didn't find it, then it doesn't matter if Glory City still exists or not. When they come back, they can still take it away and continue selling it. If we find it, it will be given to you as a favor. He Chuan chuckled, merchants seek profits. Of course, they won't do a loss-making business. The goods that can't be taken away and my good impression, they'll at least get one of them. Su Ke gave him a thumbs up. Your Highness is indeed thoughtful, it seems that you've already expected all of this. He Chuan smiled slightly and didn't say anything. The content of the letter was probably to thank him for sending people to escort the group of merchants to Freedom City, so he especially left behind a large number of rice noodles and winter clothes. Su Ke thought that he was far-sighted. But He Chuan knew that this was the butterfly effect brought about by the law of heaven, the law of karma buff of thousands of gold are gone and returned. It was quite interesting. At first, he thought that it was an immediate compensation for spending something. He did not expect it to be returned in this way. Although it came a little slow and he might not be able to find it, the biggest benefit was that he did not need to explain. No one would doubt him. Reasonable. Now it was a bit like an investment. It was a small gamble. Whether or not he could get the final profit depended on his own ability. Not bad. He Chuan liked this kind of challenging thing. Otherwise, with unlimited free resources, even a pig might be able to get an SS rank. Oh no, unlimited resources wouldn't gain a high rating. Doing so would instead be self-defeating. Unless one obtained resources and did not use them but hoarded them, then this buff would be meaningless. There was no need to think about this now. Satisfied. He Chuan's thoughts sank slightly, and he started to use his deduction ability. Continue to distribute resources, can activate the law of karma, thousands of gold are gone, reward received for distributing wealth, a return of kindness. Do not distribute resources. There are no special changes in the world timeline, waiting for the arrival of the beast tide. It was still the same notification. If he chose the former, he did not know when the reward would be given to him. If something unexpected happened along the way, there might not even be any emergency supplies. As for the latter, it was growing steadily, waiting for the arrival of the beast tide. The rich merchants left a lot of resources behind, giving them to the remaining citizens in the city. It would not be a problem for them to eat for a few months. He Chuan did not think for long before he resolutely chose the former. Continue to spend the wealth. He looked further ahead. The beast tide these few months was nothing at all. It was just a small stumbling block at the beginning of his arrival in this place. After he passed it, what should he do? He Chuan was very clear in his heart. Only by continuing to develop and making Glory City bigger and stronger was the fastest way to raise the final evaluation point. Hence, he issued an order. From today onwards, all citizens in the city could receive a certain amount of survival supplies from the city lord's mansion. This included the food and clothes that everyone needed the most. Once this news spread out, the entire city was in an uproar. 64 Chapter 64. Was Glory City rich? The answer was no, but it could not be completely denied. There was a time when Glory City was glorious, but now it had declined. So much so that for ordinary people, wanting to eat a full meal became extravagant hope, and wearing cotton-padded jackets became a fantasy. Therefore, while the people were shocked, they also had some doubts. Could it be that a wise city lord had come to Glory City this time? Was he thinking of them wholeheartedly? To be honest, they did not dare to believe it. That was because before this, the imperial court had sent officials and soldiers to escort a large number of supplies to aid Glory City every year. However, because the journey was too far, the beasts were rampant along the way, and there was the risk of being plundered by the mountain bandits. As a result, less than 10% of them would fall into the hands of the commoners of Glory City. Since the imperial court could not provide them with relief, they could only rely on themselves. However, the strange beasts were all around Glory City. Other than the experienced hunters who dared to go out to hunt some small wild beasts, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to return if they went out alone. Therefore, the lives of most people depended on the merchants who frequently came and went to sell goods. Working under them would earn them a meager salary. Then they bought living resources from these merchants. Originally, He Chuan sending all the merchants away had already cut off the livelihood of the people. Although they didn't say anything and didn't come to the city lord's mansion to cause trouble, they were only afraid that He Chuan would use this as an excuse to make a fuss. What if the city defense army arrested them? Then they would all be executed for plotting a rebellion. With one wave of operations, they would be able to reduce the loss of a large amount of food. Moreover, they could make an example of them and quickly build up their prestige. The civilians were not stupid. They had already fought with several city lords many times before. This level of scheming was not something trivial in their eyes. However, the development of things had exceeded their expectations. What did He Chuan mean by this decree? Was it for real? Does he know how many common people there are in the city? Giving it away like this? Not preserving the city guards anymore? No one was sure what He Chuan was thinking. After a discussion, they all decided to hide in the dark and wait and see what would happen. Last night's small favor did not win the trust of the common people. Everyone was afraid that after taking the supplies, the new city lord would come up with some tricks to mess with them. This was a normal move, but in this special city, it was very sudden. No one dared to be the first to receive the supplies. This thought caused He Chuan to not see anyone outside the city lord's mansion for several hours after he gave the order. Everyone was still living at home, struggling for their lives. He Chuan did not know the reason, but he was not in a hurry. In any case, the food was there. Every day, he would cook a big pot of fragrant porridge and bring a rich side dish. If no one came, he would let the city guards eat, and it would not be a waste. Soon, a few days passed. Many people in the city had eaten most of the food stored in their homes. During the night when they could not eat their fill, the cold wind was even more piercing. Thus, on the morning of the 6th day, a little girl wearing a single garment finally stumbled from the end of the alley and knelt in front of the city lord's mansion to kowtow. "City lord, I beg you to save my mother." He Chuan was not at the door. It was the guards who received her. The little girl's face was purple, her lips were white, and she looked like she had been frozen. The guards quickly followed the order that He Chuan had passed down earlier and brought her to a shed that had been specially built for distributing resources. They brought her charcoal and food. "Eat something first, brother guard has already gone to call the city lord for you." The little fellow nodded heavily. Seeing the porridge in front of her as if seeing the timely rain in the middle of the drought, she immediately wolfed it down. Not long after, her body temperature gradually warmed under the orange-red glow of the charcoal, and her complexion became much better. At this moment, He Chuan, who had received the news, also rushed over. The guard timely introduced, "Little girl, this is the city lord." When the little girl saw He Chuan, she hurriedly put down the bowl and chopsticks in her hands, knelt on the ground, and shouted, "City lord, I beg you to save my mother." He Chuan squatted down and personally helped her up. He patted the dust on his trouser legs and asked kindly, "What happened to your mother?" "Mother." She ate a few wild mushrooms and then fell to the ground, motionless, sob, sob. The little girl wiped her tears as she spoke. When she said motionless, she finally could not hold it in anymore and burst into tears. He Chuan frowned slightly and glared, "Send a few people to her house and bring the child's mother over." "Yes, Your Highness." The guards were even more respectful of He Chuan's identity as a prince. Not long after, they brought her over. He Chuan knew medical skills. After a careful examination, he found that there was not much of a problem. It was just that she had accidentally eaten a poisonous mushroom. However, the poison was not very strong and it did not harm her life. After getting someone to feed half a bowl of porridge, the little girl's mother immediately woke up. Where am I?" she said in a daze. The little girl threw herself into her arms and sobbed. "Mother." Cair thought that she would never see her mother again. The woman comforted her child and looked away at the same time. Suddenly, she saw He Chuan. The woman was shocked and hurriedly knelt on the ground with her daughter in her arms. "Greetings, city lord. There's no need to be so polite." He Chuan had a faint smile on his face the entire time. It was like a spring breeze, "Don't eat anything recklessly next time." Sigh. The woman sighed softly, "If I wasn't so hungry that I fainted, who would be willing to take such a risk?" He Chuan was a little curious, "Didn't I issue a decree? All citizens of Glory City can come to the city lord's mansion to receive all living supplies. Could it be that the news didn't reach you?" The woman hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. The city lord had just saved her, so it wasn't easy for her to voice out her doubts. He Chuan didn't force her and directly ordered his subordinates to move the supplies. Among them were 4 bags of wood, 2 bags of rice, a bag of flour, a quilt, and 4 sets of thick clothes. Apart from that, there were many other miscellaneous items that were necessary to survive this winter. "If you don't have enough, you can come to me to get more." He Chuan sent someone to send the mother and daughter back. They had to make sure that they were safe and sound. He instructed, "Remember to hide the food, don't tell anyone. If anyone asks, just tell them that you only have firewood and a quilt. Be careful of others. Nowadays, people who are extremely hungry are no different from wild beasts." The woman was stunned. Before they left, she hesitated for a long time and finally only said one sentence. "Your Highness, you are a good person." He Chuan smiled. 65 Chapter 65. Ever since the rescue of the mother and daughter, similar incidents had occurred more and more often. They were a group of people who couldn't stand the hunger and had no other choice but to come over to test the waters. When they saw the white grain in front of them, it would be a lie to say that they weren't excited. However, He Chuan gave these people a smaller share. Other than the standard of wood and bedding, which was the same as that of the mother and daughter, the food was given out daily. Want to eat your fill? Then come to the city lord's manor on time and report. He Chuan deeply understood that humans were lazy animals. Only pressure could force them to move forward. They could not give out all their food at once. Although the people were wary, as ordinary people, how could they expect to reach this level? After making sure that He Chuan did not have any tricks on the surface, they were delighted, and their respect for He Chuan also rose. As more and more people received favors, the reputation of He Chuan among the people in the city improved day by day. Now that they could eat and wear well, the overall crime rate had dropped a lot. It was also at this time that everyone's lives gradually returned to normal. They began to contribute to the construction of the city. However, most people had nothing to do because of the departure of the businessmen. Only a small number of people with special skills gathered together and spontaneously formed a team under He Chuan's jurisdiction. Among them were hunters who were familiar with hunting and could move in the forest. Under the guidance of He Chuan, the city lord, they went out of the city to collect wood and other materials. On one hand, they could store them so that the people in the city could keep warm when they needed them. On the other hand, they could also let other people who had nothing to do create city defense traps outside the city. Although it was unrealistic to use these things to fight against the strange beasts of this world, He Chuan's main purpose was to spread his wealth. There was no point in keeping resources in his hands. Only by spending them would he be able to obtain a greater profit. However, if he often walked by the river, how could his shoes not get wet? On a calm winter day, as usual, a hunting squad was searching for usable firewood in the forest not far away from Glory City. They didn't dare to cut the wood. The noise would attract the attention of the exotic beasts. By then, no one would be able to escape. They could only search carefully for the fine firewood buried in the snow in the white world. But today wasn't their lucky day. After going deep into the forest for some time, the snow fell heavily. Almost every second, countless snowflakes fell, covering the footprints they had left when they came. Some experienced hunters sensed the danger. If this went on, they might get lost in the woods. They had no choice but to finish their work early and return to Glory City. But an even more unfortunate thing happened. They didn't know when, but an unknown beast had already set its eyes on them. Its body was tall and mighty. Its tail alone was 2 meters long, even thicker than a child's body. Its head was abnormally fierce, and its sharp teeth were exposed. It was even stained with dark red blood and minced meat, making people shudder. No one would doubt whether it had the ability to pierce through its own bones. Such a huge creature was blocking their way back, ready to attack at any time. The hunters were stunned. Weren't strange beasts very territorial? They wouldn't easily leave their own territory, much less enter the territory of other creatures. How could they encounter such a strong exotic beast in such a place not far from Glory City? Could it be that the beast tide was ahead of schedule? This thought gave them a fright, but they couldn't panic now. Only with enough reason could they survive in front of the strange beast. Don't panic. Don't turn your back on it, stand up straight. A middle-aged man was the first to speak. There's blood on this beast's mouth. It should have just finished eating not long ago, perhaps it won't make a move on us. Follow me and slowly retreat. Everyone followed his instructions. As expected, the strange beast still had some misgivings when faced with the cautious actions of so many people. From time to time, it would let out threatening roars, trying to scare away 1 or 2 cowards, and then tear the group in front of it into pieces from its weak point. But the result disappointed it. Those who could stand here were all experienced hunters. More or less, they had all experienced similar situations. Their mental fortitude was strong enough, and they knew how to deal with it. Even if they were scared to death in their hearts, they could still maintain a relatively calm appearance, and wouldn't be a burden at the crucial moment. As time passed, the group of people shuttled back and forth in the forest. They tried to use this method to exhaust the patience of the strange beast and give up on the hunt. Unfortunately, the strange beast didn't seem to want to leave just like that. It had been following closely in the dark. The snow was getting heavier and heavier, and their vision started to become blurry. The hunters only realized later that they had lost their way. "No, we have to find a place to hide from the snow." The middle-aged hunter made a prompt decision. He looked around and said, "If we follow the mountain wall, we should run into a cave. At that time, we'll use thorns to seal the entrance of the cave and set up a bonfire to scare this beast." The other hunters all felt that it was feasible. However, someone still raised a question. What if there are strange beasts in the cave as well? Then wouldn't we be feeding them directly to the mouths? Most of the exotic beasts living in the cave are currently in hibernation. We just need to be careful. What if it's not a hibernating strange beast? If our luck is really that bad, then we'll just accept it. The middle-aged hunter glanced at him. "Are we going or not? If there are any objections, we'll go our separate ways." The person who answered could only grit his teeth. "All right." The strange beast was extremely fast. It was impossible for them to escape. Thus, a dozen or so people slowly advanced along the dark cliff. The strange beast was still lurking in the nearby forest. Although it didn't show itself, everyone knew that it definitely hadn't gone far. Not long after, they finally found a cave. They quickly drilled into it and set up a defensive structure in the shortest time possible. As the bonfire lit up, the pungent smoke formed a barrier, protecting the hunters in the cave. Sigh. Everyone looked at the strange beasts outside that didn't approach them and heaved a sigh of relief. They should be fine now. Let's explore the situation inside the cave first and see if there's any other way out. "Two people, come with me." "Wait, what do you think that is?" A young man suddenly pointed to a certain spot in the cave. The others all looked over. There seemed to be something flickering with the light of the fire, reflecting a weak luster. Was it the eyes of a strange beast? 66 Chapter 66. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The city was still as calm as before. Outside the city lord's mansion, the food that the people needed for that day was distributed as usual. He Chuan stepped on the city wall and looked down at the scenery outside the city. His mind kept deducing, trying to find a good way to resist the beast tide. At this moment, Su Ke ran up. "Your Highness, something has happened." He panted and said, "A team of hunters hasn't returned for 2 days. There's no news at all. Have you sent people out to look for them?" He Chuan asked. "The mountain is sealed by heavy snow now. The roads are very difficult to walk on. The people we sent out haven't returned either." He Chuan frowned slightly. This matter was a little difficult to handle. If the city guards were dispatched to clear the snow on the roads and receive the hunters, doing so would have the risk of attracting the strange beasts. However, if they were allowed to do nothing, the prestige that they had just accumulated in the hearts of the people might be completely gone. What should they do? In the end, just as he was feeling troubled, the city lord's manor started to make trouble first. An old man rushed to the food distribution center, pushed aside the people who were queuing up, and shouted angrily, "You bunch of heartless B***stards! All of you have hands and feet, how can you have the nerve to take this food? Yes, you have eaten your fill and are warm. What about the soldiers guarding the city? Cough cough. What about the city lord? You bunch of blood-sucking worms, cough cough, why can you take things for free with a clear conscience? Cough 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 cough." Because he was too emotional, the old man kept coughing and clutching his chest with a pained expression, so much so that he could not speak the rest of his words. The people next to him immediately surrounded him and reached out to support him. In the end, they were forcefully pushed away by him. The dirty hands that have taken the city lord's things do not have the right to touch me. These words caused many people to be dissatisfied. It's not like we didn't help the city lord. The traps outside the city and the renovation of the houses in the city, which of these things were not done by us? That's right. Old sir, I respect your age and don't want to quarrel with you. Just ask a question, do we not have the right to even eat a full meal after doing so many things? Hehe, I'm afraid that some people don't have the body to do things and are too embarrassed to eat, so they want to drag everyone along with them. Faced with such accusations, the old man's attitude remained firm. Idiot, what an idiot! Do you really think that the city lord needs you to set up traps? Repair the houses. When the beast tide arrives, will those wooden toys be able to withstand a slap from the strange beasts? Ah! What if the city falls? So what if these houses are as beautiful as a landscape painting? Won't they still be in ruins? The reason the city lord did this was to make you feel at ease and not develop the habit of slacking off because of this relief. Are you really using chicken feathers as an order? His words rendered everyone speechless. Could it be that it was really like what this old man said? The city lord was doing this for their own good. So he let them use the method of doing things to exchange for food? Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that there was indeed such a possibility. After all, who could exchange 2 hours of work for a day's rations? This was something that didn't exist when they were working under the hands of merchants in the past. Old man, you're right. At this moment, someone walked to the front of the crowd and looked at the food in his hands with reluctance. Then, he put it on the table in the grain storage. I'm not eating this food. Leave it for the soldiers guarding the city. Before the soldiers who were putting food on the table said anything, the people behind them came forward one after another and put back the food they had just received. I can't take these clothes either. The soldiers have worked so hard outside and fought so hard for us. How can we let them fight with only their clothes on? And me. And me. At this moment, He-Chuan and Su-Ke, who were alarmed, rushed over from the city wall. However, when they saw this scene, they were a little dumbfounded. What was going on? They didn't want relief? Were these people stupid? Weren't they all starving? Weren't they all freezing in the middle of the night? They were already in such a miserable state, yet they still returned the things to them? They didn't want their lives anymore? Moreover, it was fine if 1 or 2 of them did this. What the hell were they doing if all of them didn't want it? Then how was he going to get the return? The city lord is here. A voice suddenly came from the crowd. Instantly, everyone turned around and silently retreated to both sides, making a wide path for He-Chuan. At the front was the old man. When he saw He-Chuan, he immediately knelt on the ground in fear. This commoner dares to openly disobey the city lord's orders. I don't ask for forgiveness, please punish me. He-Chuan was a little helpless. Old man, why are you doing this? The old man gritted his teeth and said what he was thinking. There are no eggs left intact after a nest is overthrown. These people who only care about themselves and only care about the people in front of them can't understand. How can an old man like me who has half a foot in the coffin not understand? Sir, listen to this commoner's advice. Don't give out any more supplies. When the beast tide arrives, whatever you do will consume resources. If you don't save up now, you won't have the chance to save up in the future. If all the soldiers guarding the city die, how many more days can we commoners live? The beast tide is coming menacingly. Once the city is breached, we will all be buried with Glory City. He-Chuan nodded slightly. He finally understood what the old man was thinking. It was nothing more than thinking of using steel on the blade. Ordinary people like them who did not go to the battlefield should not waste too many military resources at this time. However, what He-Chuan wanted was to waste. What he wanted was to squander. He immediately said righteously. Soldiers protect Glory City, not for this piece of land, and certainly not for me. They are protecting you, the common people who live on this piece of land. If you are not here, what's the difference between this city and a dead city? What's the point of us protecting it? Hearing this, the old man's eyes were already filled with tears, but he still wanted to stick to his point of view. But City Lord He Chuan directly interrupted him and said sternly, I'll give it to you, just take it. Don't make me angry over this small matter. I have my own ways to resolve the military's resources. The old man fell silent. In the end, he still did not dare to disobey He Chuan, who had come from the imperial family. When the people heard these words, the gratitude in their hearts could no longer be described with words. Where else could they meet such a wise and considerate city lord? Unknowingly, the seed of loyalty had already been buried deep in their hearts, waiting for it to take root and sprout. Congratulations on unlocking the virtuous PAP achievement, your evaluation has been raised slightly. 67 Chapter 67. A familiar notification sounded. It was still a small reward. This made He Chuan understand that managing the civilians in the city was not enough to give him a high rating. He still had to start from many aspects. After returning to the city lord's manor, he started to prepare the relevant matters. However, before he could start his deduction, the leader of the militia came over and said that he had something important to tell him. Only then did He Chuan remember that a group of hunters had gone missing. After asking, it was indeed this matter. But it wasn't a bad thing. On the contrary, it was a great thing. That group of hunters had been chased by strange beasts on their way to hunt. They had accidentally come to a mountain bandit's cave. There was a large pile of food and military armor inside, but there was no one guarding it. If nothing unexpected happened, it should have been plundered by the bandits and hidden here. However, due to the heavy snow sealing the mountain or the threat of strange beasts, they were unable to take it away. In the end, they were able to take advantage of the situation. Now, all the resources had been brought back to the city by them. When He Chuan went over to take inventory, they would be able to use them at any time. When the militia leader spoke up to this point, the corners of his mouth curled up into a wide smile. He was extremely happy. The city lord was truly fortunate. Whatever he lacked, the heavens would be able to give him. With such a batch of supplies, let alone spending this month, even spending this winter would not be a problem. Let's go and take a look. He Chuan's mood was also much better. He knew that this was a reward from the heavenly law. He did not expect to save this group of hunters along the way. This saved him a lot of trouble. When he arrived at the square in the center of the city, he took a look. Whoa! It was indeed a large number of resources. Boxes of all sizes took up almost half of the space in the square. According to the captain of the militia, this was not all. Almost half of the resources were left in the cave and had been sent to be transported. He Chuan looked at the list that had just been calculated. After roughly knowing the amount of the resources that were returned this time, he began to reward the meritorious subjects. After all, someone else had found the materials on the surface. A small portion had to be given to the hunters who had lost their way in the forest. Everyone received the rewards they deserved. Especially the middle-aged hunter who was the leader. He received 3 times the number of materials and a piece of land as compensation. The result of doing this directly aroused the motivation of more people in the city. They all joined the militia and wanted to do more for Glory City. At this moment, Su Ke suddenly ran over and whispered a few words into He Chuan's ear. He Chuan frowned slightly. He immediately asked the militia captain to continue to coordinate the transportation of the resources while he and Su Ke left in a hurry. When they walked further away, there was no one around. He Chuan slowly opened his mouth. Is what you said true? Your Highness, it's absolutely true. Su Ke slightly bent his body and carefully said, the military camp is now in chaos. I suspect that a few leaders are planning a rebellion. He Chuan suddenly stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. then why did you come to tell me? Aren't you the chief of the military staff? In other words, the relationship between the leaders and you is definitely not bad. What made you give up your years of friendship with them and choose me? Your Highness. Suke smiled bitterly, I don't have any friendship with them, it's just a show. Everyone wants to rope me in, but I can't follow anyone. You want to find someone with more power as a backer. No, I really want to follow your Highness. Suke's expression suddenly changed. He said obsequiously, although you don't control the military power in the city now, with your ability and identity, it's easy for you to control these few small commanders of Glory City. He Chuan smiled and didn't say anything else. He continued to walk forward. Basically, he could rule out the possibility that Suke and the few commanders had set him up. To be honest, with his current strength, he really had to be more cautious and not put himself in danger. Therefore, after he came to the city's military camp entrance, he didn't go in directly. Instead, he let Suke go in and spread the word, asking the commanders of the few legions to come and see him. Glory City had a total of 4 legions. They corresponded to the names of the 4 city gates of the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Among them, the Azure Dragon Legion commander had the greatest contribution and formed his own faction. He had more troops and horses than the other 3 legions combined and held the position of commander of the 4 legions. However, there were also divisions of powers in the military camp. Although the Azure Dragon was the strongest, the other 3 legions never listened to his commands. They were led by the White Tiger Legion, who had been supported by the past city lords. For many years, they had been fighting against the Azure Dragon Legion. There was no other reason. In the end, it was because the character of the Azure Dragon Legion was not good. Denial. Independence. Not only did they like to criticize the soldiers of the other legions, they also used their positions and power to take advantage of their position. They took up more than half of the resources that were allocated to the camp every year for personal consumption. Almost every day, they lived luxurious life. As the saying went, if the upper beam is not upright, the lower beam must be crooked. No matter how great his achievements were. If he started to drift after sitting in this position, it would lead a large number of people astray. His subordinates were also addicted to enjoyment like him. The rules of the military camp were lax and lawless. There were even people who forced women of the city. Such a way of doing things naturally caused the other 3 corps commanders to be dissatisfied. Both sides had a long-standing grudge, but because they were both generals of the empire, they did not dare to clash with each other. Suke was well aware of the open and hidden conflicts between the 2 forces. Therefore, when He Chuan sent him in to spread the news, to be honest, he was also in a bit of a dilemma. Which commander should he inform first? This was a small, but very serious question. No matter who he went to first, he would be ostracized by the other side. But on careful thought, it didn't matter. Just call over 2 soldiers and let them spread the word for him. In the past, he might have been disgusted by the commanders on both sides. But now, it's different. He defected to He Chuan. He Chuan is the prince. The city lord. Just try to disgust me again. 68 Chapter 68. So, when Suke led the 4 commanders out of the military camp, their gazes were all focused on He Chuan. Looking at his slightly immature face, one of the commanders couldn't help but smile contemptuously. Then he said in a strange tone, I didn't expect the city lord to be so young, but he can't even walk a few steps. To think that the brothers even prepared good wine and delicious food for you in the tent, but you didn't have the fortune to enjoy it. When Suke heard this, his back instantly broke out in a sweat. F***ck. How disgusting. The first thing he said was to start a fight. Aren't you hinting to the city lord that I was the one who told you to come out to welcome him because I said he couldn't walk? What the F***ck is wrong with you? When did I ever say that? He Chuan on the other hand, He didn't seem to care at all, or he didn't seem to be able to tell. He asked in a flat voice. Who are you? These 3 simple words were full of contempt. It directly made the other party embarrassed. A few seconds later, he looked a little angry as he snorted coldly. Not only did he not introduce himself, but he also didn't bow either. Instead, he questioned. I've risked my life to guard this glory city for the city lord, but I didn't expect that you couldn't even remember a name. If other soldiers heard this, who wouldn't be disappointed? At this time, Suke came over and whispered, Your Highness, this is the Azure Dragon Commander. He Chuan understood. He knew this person's character and didn't think highly of him, so he said indifferently, Then you should feel cold. As he spoke, he turned to look at the other 3 people, Do you feel cold? One of them looked at the defeated Azure Dragon Commander and couldn't help but smile. He took a step forward and cupped his hands in salute. Your Highness has just arrived at Glory City, it's normal that you don't recognize us. We definitely don't think that way. I'm Lin Cheng, the commander of the White Tiger Army. Greetings, City Lord. The other 2 commanders also stood on the same level as Lin Cheng. I'm Fu Chen, the commander of the Vermilion Bird Army. Greetings, City Lord. I'm Han Baen, the commander of the Black Tortoise Army. Greetings, City Lord. He Chuan nodded in satisfaction, Very good. Since that's the case, from next month onwards, your salaries will be doubled and your soldiers will be given priority in the distribution of resources. The eyes of the 3 of them lit up. This city lord was capable. He was really giving them something. They knew very well that this was a move to win them over and also to give a slap. They were the ones who won them over and the Azure Dragon Commander was the one who was slapped. As expected. Now, the Azure Dragon Marshal's face was as black as coal, and his anger was obvious. He suppressed the anger in his heart, he asked fiercely, City Lord, isn't this inappropriate? Why are the 3 legions given priority in resource allocation? Aren't my Azure Dragon Legion soldiers too? Do I have to line up behind the commoners in the city? Are you teaching me how to do things? No, I just want to remind the City Lord. The Azure Dragon Marshal did not even call himself a subordinate. He narrowed his eyes and said, If there is a rebellion due to the lack of resources, I cannot bear this crime. Are the resources given to you not enough to eat? The Azure Dragon Marshal replied, The Azure Dragon Legion has the most people, and they have to bear the most military affairs. If there is an accident because they do not have enough resources, how are they going to deal with this? He Chuan smiled. To put it bluntly, he felt that there were too few resources and wanted more quotas. And he even threatened him in the open and in the dark. How despicable! Did he think the new city lord did not know that the Azure Dragon Marshal liked to corrupt? Interesting. Looking at He Chuan's faint smile and without the desire to reply, the Azure Dragon Marshal was furious. City Lord, the supplies of the army is not a small matter. I hope that you will consider it carefully. If you really let it go and cause a rebellion, I cannot bear this responsibility, and neither can the vice-generals in the Legion. If that's the case, why don't we return to our hometown and become a commoner waiting to die? The smile on He Chuan's face grew wider. Oh, did this mean that if he did not agree, he would leave with the core members of the Azure Dragon Legion? Tisk tisk tisk. He Chuan still did not reply immediately. He silently deducted in his mind. These marshals, did they count as his property? Very quickly, the deduction system reported back. Disbanding the army was also considered to be a form of giving away money. It could activate the law of karma and there will be a return. Moreover, letting him leave with his direct line of descent would be more beneficial for him to reorganize the forces in the barracks. It would be a good thing for Glory City. Hence, He Chuan grinned. All right, then I'll allow it. When the Azure Dragon Marshal heard this, he was happy. Hee, the little brat still wants to fight with me? If I want you to give me resources, you have to obediently give me resources. If I want you to do something, you have to do it. Who does the city lord count as? Does he have military authority? Does he have the ability to order me around? Wouldn't I be able to control you with just a flick of my finger? The contempt in Green Dragon Marshall's eyes deepened. He said with a fake smile, then thank you, City Lord, just send someone to deliver the resources to the barracks later. Someone will come to meet you. What supplies? He Chuan pretended to be surprised. The Green Dragon Marshal frowned, didn't you say that you would send more resources? When did I say that? Didn't you say that you were going to retire and return to your hometown? What does it have to do with resources? He Chuan looked at him with disdain, look at you, you're not very old, could it be that you're suffering from dementia at this age? Ha 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 ha. The other three marshals laughed out loud. They stood at the side in a comfortable position and started to watch the good show of Green Dragon Marshal. You! Green Dragon Marshal said in disbelief, you want me to leave the military camp? You are the one who wanted to leave, everyone heard it. Don't slander me. He Chuan corrected his words. The Azure Dragon Marshal was furious. He gritted his teeth and said fiercely, do you know what will happen if I leave the Azure Dragon Legion? I know, it's just a group of people, it doesn't matter. He Chuan looked at Suke, come, Chief of Staff, help the Marshal to handle the dismissal. Remember to ask him to report the name list first, don't miss a single one. All right. Suke happily agreed. The development of this matter was too interesting. 69 Chapter 69. The other marshals who had been watching the show were all shocked. The Azure Dragon Marshal who had stayed in Glory City for more than 10 years was going to leave because of a few words? You must be joking, right? None of them expected it. The Azure Dragon Marshal himself was even more surprised. He had clearly only used this method to coerce the young city lord in front of him in exchange for benefits. Why did this person act as if he didn't understand human language and really agreed? F***ck. If I leave, how will you defend the city? Don't you know that with a wave of my arm, more than half of the Azure Dragon Legion will leave with me? Relying on the other 3 garbage legions to defend? What are you thinking? Can you stop the beast tide? He really didn't understand. Why would he Chuan actually nod his head and agree? This was great. Originally, he wanted to establish his authority and make this city lord unable to step on him. But now, he actually made himself unable to step down. Could it be that he really didn't want the marshal position anymore? To be honest, he couldn't bear to part with it. But if he acted shamelessly, how would he be able to stand in the army in the future? Wouldn't the other 3 marshals laugh at him to death? The Green Dragon Marshal gritted his teeth and steeled his heart. He felt that he couldn't take this lying down. Damn it, so what if I left? Am I afraid of you? Just treat it as a temporary departure. Wait until you discover that the military camp can't do without me in 2 days. Let's see how you're going to beg me to return. With this thought in mind, the Azure Dragon Marshal took off his armor and helmet on the spot. He called for someone to help him organize his personal belongings in the military camp and prepare to leave immediately. Don't regret it. Before he left, he even said some harsh words. At this moment, after hearing the news, the clerks in the city rushed over to urge him to stay. Marshal! You can't leave. What will happen to Glory City if you leave? What will happen to the civilians in the city? Yes, Marshal, anyone can leave, but you can't. City Lord, you can't do this. I'll say this today, if you insist on letting the Marshal resign, I won't do this anymore. I won't do it either. If the Marshal leaves, Glory City won't be able to hold on. What are we still doing here? Waiting to die? When the Azure Dragon Marshal saw these people coming over to speak up for him, he smiled smugly. His expression looked like he was provoking He Chuan. Did you see that? There were so many people who didn't want me to leave. They were all high officials in the city. So what if you're the city lord? Don't tell me you're going to kick us all out? Then you, as the city lord, are probably going to die in name only. He Chuan didn't say anything and was laughing happily. What the hell? What were these people doing? Were they still the people working under him? They usually did not show their faces. Who would have thought that when something happened to the marshal of the military camp today, they would be blown out instantly? Now, everyone knew that they were on the same side. If he didn't clean up all of them, wouldn't Glory City belong to them in the future? Tisk tisk. He thought that it would take a lot of effort to remove the Azure Dragon Marshal's faction. He didn't expect these people to jump out on their own. However, before he could say anything, Su Ke couldn't sit still. He felt that He Chuan, a young prince, had never seen so many people trying to force their way in the palace. In order to prevent His Highness, who had just relinquished, unable to withstand the pressure, he took a step forward and stood in front of everyone. Everyone, this matter was not instigated by the city lord. If it wasn't for the marshal's aggressive attitude, it wouldn't have come to this. It's fine if you want to redeem it. First, let the marshal admit his mistake. As for the final decision, it will depend on whether your highness is satisfied. Su Ke's words were already very biased. He was completely on the opposite side of the Azure Dragon Marshal. If the other party did not step down this time, he would probably suffer a lot as the chief of staff in the army in the future. This also made He Chuan look at him in a new light. He did not think that this seemingly cunning middle-aged man would really show loyalty. He thought that this person would only be able to take advantage of the situation and maintain a neutral attitude from beginning to end. When Green Dragon Marshal heard this, he was even more displeased. He had always wanted face, and it was in front of so many people. How could he give in? If you have the guts, then kick me out, you will bear the consequences yourself. The other civil officials also expressed their stance at the same time. If the marshal were to step down, they wouldn't be officials anymore. This group of people looked as if they were certain of He Chuan's action. They were certain that he wouldn't dare to lay a hand on their group of important officials. But the result was completely out of everyone's expectations. It's impossible to take back what was done, it's the same with words. He Chuan chuckled, since you have such deep feelings for the Azure Dragon Marshal, then please leave together. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before adding, oh right, since you're leaving, leave more thoroughly. Since you guys aren't from Glory City anyway, just go back to your hometown. Don't stay here, I don't want to waste resources to support you guys. Crack. The group of people were all stunned. They looked at each other. They could see the shock and surprise in each other's eyes. Especially the Azure Dragon commander. The smile on his face froze. It turned into extreme surprise and disbelief. He really wanted to chase him away. And they wouldn't let him stay in the city anymore. F***ck. Was this kid a hothead? But no matter how much he couldn't believe this was the truth, He Chuan ordered the marshal of the three legions, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise, to send people to send them away. After this, the barracks also became chaotic. From the centurions to the sergeants, all of them wanted to leave with the marshal. It had to be said that after so many years of hard work, the soldiers of the Azure Dragon Legion only listened to his commands. They were not very appreciative of He Chuan, the city lord. Based on this situation, the marshal would probably take half of the legions away with him. However, He Chuan didn't care. He didn't care about that. He had the buff to protect him, so he would make up for these losses. It all depended on whether he could find it or not. He believed that with the help of the deduction system, it wouldn't be a big problem. 70 Chapter 70. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the soldiers in the barracks left. The enormous Azure Dragon Legion soldiers did not take much time to leave. The other marshal could not help but feel a little sad seeing this scene. The strongest legion had left, so this glory city. Could it still be defended? Should it still be defended? To be honest, although they had never been on good terms with the Azure Dragon Marshal and had constant friction with each other. However, when faced with such an external crisis, they did not want the city's defensive forces to be reduced to such a degree. Putting aside the factions, they were all soldiers guarding the city. However, up until now, there was only a sergeant standing outside a tent, and he had never moved. One person. The mighty army was now only guarded by one person. It would be laughable if word got out. He Chuan slowly walked forward. "Aren't you leaving?" The sergeant immediately bowed. "Reporting to the city lord, I am a soldier of Glory City, not a soldier under the command of the Azure Dragon." He Chuan raised his eyebrows. "You really think so?" The other party nodded heavily. "This morning, when that old man in the city was causing trouble, I was there too. He is my father. After listening to what you said, I have decided that you are a good city lord who truly serves the country and the people. Worthy of my lifelong loyalty." As he spoke, he suddenly knelt down on one knee and cupped his fists. "Sir! As long as you give the order, I will die without a second thought." After hearing his words, the few marshals standing not far away looked at each other and suddenly felt they might lose their positions because of this. At that moment, they no longer thought about those miscellaneous things. One by one, they went forward and knelt on one knee like the sergeant, vowing their loyalty. The captains and deputy generals of the legion also ran over and expressed their positions. "All right, this is your own decision," He Chuan replied helplessly. At this point, the power of the remaining 3 legions in the military camp had been taken by He Chuan. However, everyone understood that all of this was only temporary. Everyone present was clever. They knew how to judge the situation. At this time, they were standing on He Chuan's side not because of his identity as the city lord but his title as a prince. They were counting on He Chuan to ask for reinforcements from the imperial court. He Chuan did not consider what these people were thinking. He asked Su Ke, the military chief of staff, to distribute all the armor he had just harvested to the remaining 3 legions to strengthen the military strength. Since this thing was of no use to him, he might as well give it away and activate the law of karma to get more returns. Such a generous act naturally made the 3 marshals very satisfied. More or less, they gained some trust. After that, the atmosphere in the military camp was unusually easygoing. The vicious fights that frequently happened in the past never happened again. Everyone stayed in their posts, each doing their part and doing their best. Not only that. After Glory City lost that batch of civil servants, it seemed that their efficiency in handling government affairs had increased significantly. Many invisible obstacles had been reduced. This time, Su Ke finally understood. It turned out that all of this was within His Highness' expectations. He had long guessed there was a spy among the civil servants sent by the Azure Dragon Marshal to infiltrate the internal affairs. Taking advantage of the Azure Dragon Marshal's request for resources this time, he took advantage of the other party's character flaw and directly pushed the boat with the current, driving out all the army's pests. By doing so, not only he gathered the army's morale but also made those who stayed behind feel a sense of belonging to Glory City. Moreover, they could use of the resources they had just obtained more effectively. They would be able to avoid being embezzled by people like the Azure Dragon Marshal, so as to fill their own pockets. It was really killing 2 birds with one stone. Su Ke was deeply shocked. Initially, he thought that the prince, He Chuan, who had been pampered all year round, had a bad temper. He disregarded everything and wanted to bring down the Azure Dragon Marshal, who had dissed him. Ultimately, he did not expect his seemingly unintentional and casual move to bring so many positive effects behind the scenes. No wonder it was said that accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger, and the emperor's heart was like the sea. He had to think twice before doing anything. He did not seek to figure out the emperor's intentions but only hoped he would not make a mistake in it. Looking at it now, it was not an exaggeration at all. After all, he was once the crown prince. Although he is no longer the crown prince, his intentions are not something that a small subordinate like me can guess. Suke sighed softly. Thinking back on what he had done, he started to feel lucky again. Yups. He did not do anything wrong. His choice was not wrong at all to follow His Highness. In the next few days, the soldiers in the army were all familiarizing themselves with the newly distributed weapons and equipment and researching new battle strategies. In case they were not used to the battlefield when the time came. The remaining 3 legions in the army were not small either. Although the White Tiger mainly led the Vermilion Bird and Black Tortoise, in reality, they were still in charge of their affairs due to their lack of energy. This made them look like a pile of loose sand. He Chuan had to find a new marshal to prevent the situation from happening. Initially, he was going to choose one of the 3 marshals. After that, he would nominate someone from the next rank to replace the vacant marshal position. However, after he understood it, he realized that whether it was the Vermilion Bird, Black Tortoise, or even the White Tiger Legion, they all had the same characteristic. That was stability. This was not within He Chuan's considerations. Stability meant they could only have good command ability and not make mistakes in battle. However, their overall view of the big picture was not enough. They were not the type of strategic talents. The position of marshal required one to have a view of the big picture. If one did not have the ability and forcefully occupy it, it would only delay military affairs. He Chuan had no choice but to announce throughout the city. He welcomed everyone to bring out talents and let those with talent come out to benefit everyone. There were no conditions and ages restriction. There were no requirements. If you had the ability, you could be the marshal of one of the 3 armies. This kind of appointment model was unprecedented. In everyone's eyes, it was very new. Hence, countless people responded. The applicants lined up from streets to alleys to the city lord's manor gate. They all came to join in the fun, from an 80-year-old man to an 8-year-old child. Even Suke volunteered and eagerly came to do the test questions He Chuan gave. He wanted to see if he had the honor. In the end, among the people who came to do the written test, not even a single one passed. 71 Chapter 71. Even He Chuan himself did not expect this result. Was the question that difficult? It was not that difficult, right? The deduction was based on his own standard to create the test question. How could no one pass it? Could there be a mistake? With the thought of the test, he did it himself. Then, He Chuan scored 87 out of 100. It was considered an excellent result. But it was not considered top-notch. It meant that there was still room for improvement. It was impossible that no one in Glory City was better than him in leading troops, right? Hence, he waited for another day. But the result still disappointed him. Among the people who came to take the test, there were not many who could reach 70, let alone 80. If even he could not surpass it, how could he lead the 3 legions? He Chuan had no choice but to put this matter aside for the time being and continue to look for ways to spread his wealth. There were still a lot of resources in the city. Especially the military. Due to the departure of the Azure Dragon Legion, even if the remaining 3 legions had 2 sets of equipment, their armors and weapons would still pile up like a mountain. It was too wasteful to leave these resources to rust. He had to think of a way to use them up. He Chuan did some calculations and the result was that he could let the experienced hunter team bring the materials to Freedom City. He could contact the merchants who had benefited from He Chuan and sell these surplus resources. He did it as soon as he thought of it. He Chuan immediately called Suke over and told him about this matter. "My lord! Your Highness! Please don't!" Suke was shocked. "We've finally saved some resources in our hands, we can't sell them. It doesn't matter, if the old ones won't go, the new ones won't come. You have to learn to be willing to part with them." He Chuan smiled faintly, "Just do as I say." Suke scratched his head and still wanted to say something, but seeing He Chuan's determined expression, he didn't dare to say it and felt very uncomfortable. He Chuan could not help but laugh. If you want to say something, just say it, I won't punish you. Suke was still a little hesitant. Then Your Highness, make a promise. Stop talking nonsense. Either do something or say it, choose one yourself. Sigh. I'm going all out. Suke had no choice but to pat his thigh to cheer himself up and then slowly say his thoughts. Your Highness, why are you doing these thankless things every day? Selling resources is easy to say, but do you know how difficult it is to do it? The previous encounter with the mutated beasts had already left many people with lingering fear. Now, everyone doesn't dare to leave the city too far to search for resources. It's still unknown whether the hunters have the courage to bring the goods out. Moreover, even if there are fearless hunters who are willing to travel with goods and successfully arrive at Freedom City, will they come back after exchanging the goods for gold coins? You can't trust the consciousness of these people too much. Suke talked a lot. He Chuan heard it, but he didn't care much. What he wanted was the result of these hunters not coming back. To spread one's wealth, of course, one had to lose before one could get their wealth back. Doing business was called an equivalent exchange, it wasn't a loss at all. If it could be done, it didn't matter. Not only was money easier to carry than goods, but it could also be exchanged for what one wanted. It was more widely applicable. Along the way, it could also verify the loyalty of the hunters to him and the attitude of the merchants heading to the Freedom City towards him. Killing two birds with one stone, why not? Thus, Suke only saw He Chuan's enigmatic smile. After saying a lot of thoughts, seeing that the prince in front of him did not express any opinions, he could not help but feel uncertain. Am I thinking too much? The probability of these things happening is very small. Or maybe I'm too short-sighted. His Highness already knows how to deal with the follow-up matters. Although Suke was a little unsure, he still could not understand. Why did he feel that His Highness was still confident in winning even though these very realistic questions were placed in front of him? Was it an illusion? He hesitated for a moment again. He Chuan did not answer his questions. He patted the chief of staff who had just served for a short time, smiled lightly, and left. Don't think too much, just give the order. Suke looked at He Chuan's retreating figure and sighed. He had no choice but to do as he was told. That afternoon, the news spread throughout the city. There was nothing he could do. Not everyone in the militia was a hunter. And the number of hunters was not large. It was impossible to transport so many goods. Therefore, they could only use the method of a hunter leading the group and letting ordinary people follow them to transport the goods together. There were very few people who responded. Everyone knew how terrifying the strange beasts were, and no one dared to run around at this time. In the end, it was the people in the militia who volunteered, and in the end, a group of a few hundred people was assembled. It was the same as the original escort of the merchants. Everyone left in batches. While avoiding being wiped out by the strange beasts, they also reduced the risk of being discovered. Along the way, the White Tiger Legion's marshal, Lin Cheng, also sent his own direct line of soldiers to escort them. This was what Suke had requested. On one hand, it was to prevent the militia from never returning. On the other hand, it was also to ensure their safety. After changing out of their worn-out battle armor, they were now wearing new equipment, and their strength was no longer the same as before. As long as they formed a battle formation, it wouldn't be a problem to defend against the attacks of ordinary strange beasts. Using it to escort the supplies team out could also increase the chances of success. By the time all the hunter teams left, it was already late at night. Lin Cheng dragged his tired body back to his own home. While eating, he talked about this matter with his sister, and his heart was filled with emotion. I don't know what the current city lord is thinking, he's really unpredictable. As he spoke, he picked up a piece of food and put it into his sister's bowl. Eat slowly. Brother, big shots always have their own ideas, let's do our things well and not make mistakes. His sister smiled and reached out to touch the table several times before she finally caught the chopsticks. You're right. Lin Cheng then took her other hand and placed it by the side of the bowl. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he asked, Sister, don't you often read those Braille books at home? How's your learning going? I don't know. His sister's expression didn't change much. She said in a calm tone, I've been staying at home and have never gone out. I don't know anyone, it's useless to know this knowledge. I have a test question that the city lord personally came up with, do you want to try it? Brother, read it to me. Okay. Listen carefully, the first question, if you 72 Chapter 72. Lin Cheng read the questions one by one, letting his sister answer them one by one. What surprised him was that not only did his sister answer the questions smoothly, she didn't pause when answering. Moreover, the way she solved the questions was all in directions he had never imagined. Unique. Unique. It was as if she looked at every question from everyone's standpoint. Wasn't this what the city lord meant by looking at the big picture? Lin Cheng was a little annoyed. If I had such a brain, wouldn't the position of Marshal be in my hands? However, on second thought, it was also a good thing that his sister had such an ability. Why not let his sister give it a try? However, Lin Cheng hesitated as soon as the idea was born. He sighed slightly as he looked at his sister's lifeless eyes. His sister was exemplary in every aspect. She was beautiful and delicate, and her personality was gentle like jade. She was gifted with talent and insight far beyond the average person. Logically speaking, she was a very dazzling existence wherever she went, but she was blind. Lin Cheng's mood became a little depressed when he thought of this. However, out of selfishness, he still asked his sister how she felt about the current city lord. The blind sister nodded lightly. He is a very good and very powerful person. He dares to give up on business and has the willpower to open the granary to save the city's citizens. He even dared to force the marshal of the three armies away before the beast tide arrived and disarm half of the army. Now, the one with abilities have a chance, letting everyone have the qualifications to become a marshal. Everyone will rely on their abilities, which will be fair and just. Among the past city lords, no one can compare to him in terms of controlling people or controlling the situation. He is worthy of our loyalty. Lin Cheng was stunned for a moment. Looking at the worship on his sister's face while narrating, he was a little confused. Sister, what you said? Why doesn't it sound like a good thing? Is it that great? Of course, brother, can't you tell? The blind sister's expression became serious, and she said thoughtfully, letting the merchants leave to separate the classes and remove the basic conflicts. They don't care about the losses in the army, but they still want to open the granaries. It's to capture the people's hearts and make everyone stand on the same line. Forcing the marshal of the three armies away is because the Azure Dragon Legion's reputation isn't outstanding. After being kicked out, they can make the barracks return to their hearts and no longer fight amongst themselves. Everything he does has a deep meaning. It's all for the good of Glory City. How can it not be great? Lin Cheng fell silent. He really didn't think so much. He initially thought that this city lord was so young and didn't know how complicated the world was. When he encountered a matter, he would just casually handle it. Who knew that there were so many mysteries behind this? Shallow. He was thinking too shallow. Lin Cheng sighed and felt a little ashamed at the same time. He didn't expect that after being a marshal in the army for so many years and being supported by successive city lords, his understanding of matters was even worse than his blind sister, who had always stayed home. Sigh. He was a little embarrassed to return as the White Tiger Corps' marshal. However, Lin Cheng ultimately discovered his sister's ability after this incident. He immediately asked her if she wanted to meet the city lord. Not to mention the position of a marshal of the three armies, at least it made her ability shine. The blind sister naturally agreed happily. She was initially very interested in this city lord, who had an unusual way of doing things, so she would accept such a request. So, early the following day, not long after He Chuan woke up and was about to review the messy matters that had piled up in the city over the past few days, Lin Cheng brought his sister to visit him. After a brief introduction, He Chuan also knew why the other party had come. He did not mind the blind sister's physical flaws or that she was a woman. He completely ignored the rules of the military that did not recruit women. He very seriously took over the answers recorded by Lin Cheng's blind sister and read them carefully. Through the deduction system, he got a shocking score. 97. In other words, the blind sister's answer was 97% perfect in the deduction system's eyes. This was definitely a terrifying result. Perhaps there would not be a second person like this in the entire city. No. Not the entire city. Perhaps there would be very few people in the entire dynasty who could be on par with the blind sister. It was said that when God closed a door for you, He would open a window. It was indeed the case. The blind sister who had lost her vision was far more thoughtful than an ordinary person regarding this level of imagination. He Chuan naturally would not hide her ability. However, the battlefield was ever-changing. The marshal needed to make corresponding judgments based on the situation. In this regard, the blind sister lacked the conditions to achieve it. After discussion, He Chuan decided to make Lin Cheng the new marshal and manage all the legions. At the same time, his sister was given the title of military advisor and displayed her skills on the sand table. Both of them were very satisfied and knelt to express their gratitude. He Chuan casually helped them up and turned to talk about the most significant problem they were facing. Beast Tide. Miss Lin Yi, you should know that the strength of the beast tide is not something that can be dealt with by ordinary means. I know very little about it, and I'm currently worrying about it. Do you have any suggestions, Miss? Lin Cheng, who was standing at the side, clenched his fists. The city lord's test was a little too big. What if his sister could not answer it, or if she could not answer it satisfactorily, wouldn't her position, which had just been verbally assigned, be revoked again? Lin Ya only pondered for a moment before she began to answer. I think that there are 3 steps to deal with the beast tide. Oh? What 3 steps? He Chuan followed the conversation and asked. First, use the awakened as the vanguard to cut down their edge. Second, equip the heavy shield legion with magic cannons set up at the back of the battle formation to cover the attack. Third, to use resources obtained in a war to support that war. Linya was beaming with joy. Her 3 sentences were sonorous and powerful as if she had built a vast world in her mind. 73 Chapter 73. As she narrated, He Chuan gradually understood what Linya meant by the 3 strategies. The first 2 were easy to understand. While the awakened were in charge of the attack, they would also develop magic cannons as defensive tools to assist in the fight against the beast tide. The last one was a little more complicated. To put it simply, the beast tide didn't come all at once. Instead, it was divided into many waves. The timing was uncertain, and the quantity was uncertain. Since it was such an invasion pattern, they could accumulate resources in the battle as the defenders. For example, they could sell beast meat to Freedom City in exchange for gold coins, and then buy military supplies and even defensive weapons. As long as they could do that, it would become easier and easier to defend in the future. However, the beginning was always the hardest. Putting aside how to deal with the first batch of strange beasts, the city didn't have any awakened ones needed for the first step. That's right, not a single one. If it were any other city, an awakened one wouldn't be a particularly rare existence. After all, the recovery of spiritual energy had been going on for dozens of years. Although the cultivation technique wasn't complete, there were quite a few people who had successfully awakened. Otherwise, the strange beasts would have long occupied the territory where humans lived. However, the current situation in Glory City was the awakened ones weren't willing to come to this place that was considered a dead city to die. This also made the first step very difficult to carry out. Without the awakened ones, there was no way to form a vanguard force that could threaten the beast tide. If the beast tide rushed directly to the city, even if magic cannons were developed, the shells wouldn't be able to cover it. Linya made a suggestion. Near Glory City, there was a dojo that operated in a gray area. They used a medicine called hanshi powder to stimulate the human body's potential. Together with the guidance technique, they could cultivate in a state similar to awakening. Such people were called pseudo-awakened. The difference between awakened and pseudo-awakened was that the awakened had innate special abilities. They could either control fire or create frost, but the latter didn't. Even so, the pseudo-awakened possessed extremely powerful physical combat strength and could fight head-on with strange beasts. As long as they bought the hanshi powder and obtained the guidance technique from the dojo, a large batch of pseudo-awakened would appear in the city to strengthen its defenses. However, hanshi powder was considered a prohibited drug in the country. Not only was it prohibited from being sold, but it was also challenging to obtain. The price had always been high in the black market. The current state of the city's treasury was simply unable to afford it. Linya had no other choice at this point. These problems were not things that she could handle. She could only hand them to He Chuan, the city lord, to handle. He Chuan thought for a while but was not in a hurry to solve these strategic difficulties. Instead, he pulled Linya and asked her some more questions about martial artists. To him, these were even more crucial. Perhaps he could find clues to perfect the tyrannical true cultivation manual. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. Linya knew very little about this. She only combined some of the information she had heard from Lin Cheng with the knowledge she had obtained from the Braille book and came up with a hypothesis. She didn't know precisely what the awakened system in this world was like. Lin Cheng did not know either. He was not awakened and had never left Glory City. His knowledge of the outside world was limited and he could not help He Chuan. He Chuan had no choice but to deal with the current matter first. He was short of money. He did not know how the people who went to Freedom City were doing. Where would the rebate come from if they did not bring back the money? He Chuan shook his head. This matter couldn't be rushed. He could only wait slowly. Wait for the opportunity to come one day and make him rich in one go. This was the only way to continue the plan. Thus, 2 days later, the day was still going on smoothly. However, the strange beasts outside Glory City roared more frequently. It seemed that the food in the mountain forest was harder to find. As a result, those dangerous existences began to stir and had the idea of hunting the creatures in the city. The beast tide might arrive soon. The militia went out more cautiously. Everyone was very nervous. They were afraid that the battle horn would sound at the next moment. It was also at this time that the hunters who went to Freedom City to trade returned. Chief of Staff, Su Ke, came to report at the first moment. The wealthy merchants in Freedom City were very generous, and when they heard that the merchant team was assigned by He Chuan, they directly used their connections to increase the price of the military supplies and sold them to the 2 neighboring countries that were at war. The profits were extremely bountiful. However, because the merchants had taken 20% and they suffered losses on the way, they only got a little more than 60%. Even so, they still filled up the treasury that was lacking money at the moment. With such a large sum of money, the original plan could be started. Immediately, Lin Cheng ordered his troops to prepare to look for the dojo in the gray area. I don't know if this counts as a rebate. If it doesn't count, then there should be more profits in the future. Before he left, He Chuan suddenly thought of this problem. The loss on the road and the merchant's share should count as his loss. Logically speaking, he should be able to trigger a rebate. However, by selling it to a neighboring country, it was already a huge profit. The transaction price far exceeded the market price, and it was even more than the rebate from before. It didn't make sense. He might as well ignore it. Perhaps he would gain something from this trip? What he needed to consider now was the expedition. It was very likely that it would attract the attention of the strange beasts. However, according to Lin Cheng, it would be fine after they walked out of this forest. Further away was a natural Gobi desert. The environment was extreme, even strange beasts rarely set foot there. As long as they reached there, they could basically march freely without any worries. Hence, under He Chuan's orders, the army was split into dozens of batches and dispersed out of the city. At that time, they would gather at the designated location. 74 Chapter 74. In the mountains, strange sounds rang out continuously, and the cries of beasts rang out incessantly. In the face of a potential crisis, everyone was walking very cautiously. He Chuan's team was full of elites, including Lin Cheng and his sister, as well as the remaining 2 corps marshal and the chief of staff, Su Ke. Apart from that, the ones escorting them were also the elites of the military. Their strength was robust, and they could resist even 1 or 2 strange beasts. However, whether they were there or not wouldn't affect the efficiency of their journey. After all, it was impossible for them to be attacked by any strange beasts in front of He Chuan's deduction system. But the other teams might not be so lucky. He Chuan had brought out 8,000 people this time, but when they arrived at their destination, only about 6,000 people came one after another. If nothing went wrong, a large portion of the people who didn't come would never be able to arrive. The remaining people were trapped, waiting for an opportunity to escape. He Chuan couldn't wait for everyone to gather before making his move. After leaving a few people at their station to wait, he led his troops to the depths of the Gobi Desert. No one on the team knew the exact location of the dojo. They could only rely on He Chuan. The deductive system had to have enough information to make subsequent judgments. He first found a vantage point and observed the entire Gobi Desert. It was not difficult to know where the dojo was. Where there were people, there had to be water. He just needed to find where there was water. Then, He Chuan analyzed a wave of knowledge he had learned in school, and with the help of the deductive system's verification, he found the place most likely to be the dojo's location. They immediately rushed over, but when they reached the top of the hill and looked down, they saw an unexpected scene. This was indeed a good location for the dojo. However, at this moment, the pseudo-awakened who lived here were surrounded by a group of bandits. It was a bit funny to say that they were robbed by the bandits, who were ordinary people. Lin Cheng looked carefully and suddenly said in surprise, "Isn't that the Azure Dragon Legion? Indeed, I didn't expect they would be reduced to such a state after not seeing them for a few days. It seems like they want to seize the dojo's territory." Su Ke also saw through it. Then, he looked at He Chuan and asked, "Your Highness, what should we do? Should we go down and take a look or wait and see?" "Let's go directly." He Chuan chuckled, "By helping the dojo resolve the crisis, we might be able to borrow the guiding technique that Miss Linya talked about. If we wait and see, they might not give it to us." The few of them smiled knowingly. On the field, the Azure Dragon leader raised his spear and faced the dojo's door. "Don't be stubborn. I am the leader of Glory City's marshal. I came here today just to reorganize the army. If you don't open the door and receive my order, no one in your dojo will survive." His attitude was very unyielding and arrogant. Relying on the army behind him, he directly spouted nonsense. He did not hide his meaning of "if I want it, you have to give it to me." The people in the dojo were not fools. As awakened ones, even if they were fake, they were all outstanding people. They were as smart as monkeys. How could they not guess the intentions of the Azure Dragon leader? However, there weren't many people left to guard the dojo. Although they had some strength, the strongest dojo master was still in seclusion, so it was impossible for him to come out and assist them. Once they started fighting, even if they could defeat these troops, their side would suffer heavy losses. This was the best-case scenario. but the possibility of all of them being wiped out was higher. Therefore, no one dared to act rashly and could only wait. However, the Azure Dragon leader's patience was clearly very limited. After hearing that there was no movement inside the door, he immediately sent troops to charge. With a loud bang, the door did not move at all, as if something hard was pressed against the back. The Azure Dragon leader was furious and immediately ordered the archers to simultaneously fire tens of thousands of arrows. When the people in the dojo heard the commotion, they immediately retreated to the back of the building. However, at this moment, there was a commotion behind the Azure Dragon Legion. Miserable cries and cries of alarm were heard continuously. At first, the Azure Dragon leader didn't notice it and was about to give the order. However, a small soldier at the back stumbled over and bumped into his horse. Then, the armor on his body scratched the horse's body, causing the horse to be frightened and directly throw the Azure Dragon leader to the ground. F*K. The Azure Dragon leader cursed. With the help of a few people, he stood up and lashed out with his whip. Then, he shouted angrily, "What are you panicking for? Men! Drag him down and beat him 20 times. The small soldier was scared out of his wits as he sat on the ground in a daze, not knowing what to do. The few deputy generals beside him tried their best to stop him. They wanted to know why the small soldier was so flustered. After asking, they were all dumbfounded. An invasion from outside? Well equipped? Really? At this moment, shouts and killing could be heard everywhere. Not only at the back of the battle formation but also many flags on the side of the mountain. At a glance, there were at least 10,000 of them. What was even more frightening was that many unknown troops in black armor were already charging over and surrounding them. Although there weren't many of them, when combined with the flags of the small troops on the mountain, it was a very oppressive feeling. When He-Chuan's group of people slowly walked over, the Azure Dragon leader could no longer hide the shock on his face. How could it be you? Why can't it be us? Su-Ke laughed, seeing such good equipment. Are you envious? Are you jealous? You didn't expect this, right? This is all thanks to you. If you hadn't left, we wouldn't have been able to let everyone wear such good equipment. The Azure Dragon leader was highly jealous but still refused to admit it. I don't have this much equipment? What a joke! I, the Azure Dragon Marshal, have never lacked resources. Lin Cheng was expressionless. You've already removed your position as Marshal and are now wandering outside. How dare you call yourself the Azure Dragon Legion of Glory City? Lin Cheng! Stop acting like a wolf! The Azure Dragon leader shouted angrily, when I was leading the army in battle, you were still playing with mud. Do you have the right to talk to me? If he doesn't, what about me? He-Chuan smiled and took a step forward. It's really fate, Lord Leader. I met a stray dog like you when I was out for a walk. The Azure Dragon leader gritted his teeth. Who do you think you are? A brat who is still wet behind the ears. Don't think you are great just because you became the city lord. Over the years, the city lord has changed over and over again. But look, when had the position of Azure Dragon Marshal changed? Impudent! Su-Ke snorted coldly, you dare to be rude to His Highness and speak so arrogantly. Do you know that this is a crime worthy of beheading? Ha 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 ha! The Azure Dragon leader laughed loudly. His Highness? You think he's still His Highness after being demoted to Glory City? Don't make me laugh, all right? Why don't you go out and ask around? Who doesn't know that staying in Glory City meant a dead end? 75 Chapter 75. Su-Ke and Lin Cheng frowned, feeling that things were not simple. What do you mean? Su-Ke asked. What do I mean? Hee. The leader of the Azure Dragon sat back on the horse, turned the horse's head, and gave everyone a meaningful and sarcastic smile. You'll know when the time comes, let's go. You want to leave? Have you asked the sword in my hand? Lin Cheng shouted. Instantly, thousands of soldiers around him shouted in unison and pulled out their swords at the same time. For a moment, the sound shook the sky. It gave the soldiers of the Azure Dragon Legion a fright. The Azure Dragon leader himself was a little apprehensive. To be honest, he didn't dare to fight. Ever since he left Glory City, his army had been attacked by strange beasts several times. They had no choice but to break into pieces and flee for their lives. Right now, less than 1/10 of his army was gathered under his commands. Moreover, they were a tired army. He had even lost a lot of his original weapons and equipment. White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise, the three legions that were originally far inferior to him, had now changed into uniform armor. It looked like they were forged from the very rare black-scaled element. It was said that weapons forged from this material could easily cut through the thick and tough outer skin of strange beasts. When made into armor, it could even withstand heavy attacks from strange beasts and still remain intact. In theory, as long as a person could withstand the powerful force of the strange beasts hitting the armor, they could rely on the armor and weapons forged from the black scale to kill strange beasts one-on-one. Such excellent equipment was incomparable to the old Azure Dragon Legion, which was in a sorry state now. Once they started fighting, they would be giving themselves up. Immediately, the Azure Dragon leader had the intention to retreat. But on the surface, he still pretended to be calm. Not letting go. He narrowed his eyes, think carefully. Although my troops are not as well equipped as yours, they are not existences that can be easily controlled. If you fight with me, when you lose your troops and generals, it will only make Glory City fall faster. You. Lin Cheng was extremely furious, but he knew that the other party was right. Moreover, he wasn't the one who could make the decision. Even if he was angry, he couldn't make a huge mistake just because of a moment of impulse. Hence, he turned his head and looked at He Chuan, following the city lord's opinion. Let them go. He Chuan waved his hand lightly. Humph, at least you know what's good for you. The Azure Dragon leader left without turning back, leading the vast army behind him. It was obvious that he was afraid. However, he still refused to admit it. Su Ke and the others were all filled with anger. Looking at his back as he left, they all came to He Chuan's side. Your Highness, we let him go just like that. Su Ke hesitated for a moment and reminded, raising a tiger will lead to a disaster. Lin Cheng was also very supportive of this. He cupped his fists and said, Your Highness, as long as you give the order, I will lead 1,000 troops and bring that bastard's head over. He Chuan glanced at him, do you really have the ability? Lin Cheng hesitated for a moment, 2,000 troops. As long as there are 2,000 troops, I will definitely live up to your Highness' expectations. It's useless even if I give you 5,000 men. He Chuan shook his head slightly, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. He has been the Azure Dragon Marshal for so long, he won't be completely useless. As he spoke, he sighed softly. Actually, he also wanted to destroy the Azure Dragon Legion here to save himself some trouble in the future. However, according to the deduction system's judgment, if he really did that, the success rate would be less than 10%. Although he didn't know the exact reason, He Chuan wouldn't doubt the accuracy of the deduction system. He didn't want to take such a risk. Moreover, the most important thing now was still the 3 strategies that military advisor Linya had developed. Obtaining the guiding technique was the most practical thing. Coincidentally, the people in the dojo had learned of the Azure Dragon Legion's departure. After having a conversation across the area, they also learned that He Chuan's group was the true Glory City Legion, and even the city lord was among them. However, the troublesome thing was that the people in the dojo were more cautious and still did not open the door. Although they were grateful to He Chuan and the others for helping them out, it was still a different matter. The dojo was not open to the public. Now that the dojo master was in closed-door cultivation, they could not make the decision. Fortunately, when Lin Cheng and the others felt that they were going to return empty-handed, A burst of hearty laughter came from the depths of the dojo. Ha 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 ha, the city lord of Glory City has graced us with his presence. Please forgive me for not welcoming you. In the next moment, an old man with a long beard suddenly appeared in front of everyone. His clothes fluttered in the wind, as if he was a fairy or an illusion. Just by standing there, one would feel that he was unfathomable. He Chuan did not act arrogantly. He cupped his hands and bowed according to the rules of this world. Senior, you are too kind. We are here because we have something important to ask of you. All right, all right, all right. If not for the city lord's help, I'm afraid that my dojo, which I have been running for many years, would be in a mess now. The old man stroked his beard. If you don't mind, the city lord can come to my dojo to discuss it. As he spoke, he walked back to the dojo. With a wave of his sleeve, the door opened automatically. He Chuan was about to enter when Lin Cheng and Su Ke pulled at him at the same time. Your Highness, be careful. Your Highness, this person is unfathomable. If he harbors ill intentions, you'll be in danger if you go. Lin Yi, who was beside him, had a confused look on her face. She still did not know what exactly had happened. He Chuan smiled calmly, it's fine, wait for me outside. Take the army and station them somewhere else. Tell Miss Linya about the surrounding environment. If the Azure Dragon Legion returns, she will be in charge. Lin Cheng and Su Ke looked at each other. They did not dare to disobey He Chuan's orders, so they could only grit their teeth and agree. Then, He Chuan slowly walked into the dojo. The moment he stepped through the door, bang! The wooden door fluttered without any wind and closed tightly. Su Ke was still a little worried, that old man's skills are really strange. Will something happen to His Highness if he enters just like that? Since things have already come to this, it's useless to talk about this anymore. Lin Cheng shook his head and looked around. Then he said, let's go to the mountain and guard. Send people to keep an eye on it at all times. Once there's any movement in the dojo, we must save the city lord at all costs. 76 Chapter 76. How should I address you, my young friend? Inside the dojo master stood by a tree and waited quietly. He Chuan answered politely and then told him the purpose of this trip. Senior, I came to visit this place because I heard that there is a unique guiding technique that can help people become awakened. I wanted to borrow it. I wonder if it would be convenient. Guiding technique. The hall master was slightly surprised and asked, City Lord, don't tell me you want to use Hanshi powder to awaken your subordinates. Dojo master, you have a sharp mind. He Chuan did not hide it, the beast tide is coming. If I want to protect Glory City, this is the only way. Good. The dojo master looked at He Chuan with appreciation. He waved his hand and called a few disciples from the hall to prepare the things He Chuan needed. After He Chuan thanked him, he asked another question. Senior, can you tell me about the origin of this pseudo-awakened one? Of course. The dojo master smiled amiably. The path of cultivation in the world starts from the recovery of spiritual energy, it starts from the appearance of the awakened one, but ends here. Why is that? He Chuan asked at the right time. You'll have to ask your emperor father. The dojo master's gaze was deep, and he did not say much. Everyone has their own destiny. Wealth and honor depend on heaven. Those with outstanding talent become the awakened ones that everyone admires, but most people are ordinary people with mediocre talent. They can only spend their lives doing nothing and become the victims of this era. Oppression, bullying, and starvation are everywhere. Under such circumstances, there are naturally people who resist. The world is so big. In the end, there are still a few ordinary people who are not so talented, but are exceptionally lucky to become one of the awakened. They are different from some ambitious people. They have no intention of becoming the rulers of the dynasty. They are dedicated to the common people of the world and work hard for countless ordinary existences. While those lofty and arrogant awakened people are working hard to study cultivation techniques and strive for the title of first place, they are researching how to make ordinary people become awakened. It was under such circumstances that the Wuji Dojo appeared. He Chuan frowned. He was a little curious about what his cheap father had done, but this dojo master didn't make things clear, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. However, as the other party narrated, he gradually understood what kind of situation the awakeners and pseudo-awakeners in this world were in. At the same time, he also understood what kind of enormous existence this Wuji Dojo was. It was no exaggeration to say that no matter how barren or how dangerous the regions in this world were, they still existed. Including this place, it was only a branch of Wuji Dojo. The headquarters would allocate resources according to the quality and number of awakened in each region. No wonder Hanshi powder was classified as a prohibited drug. With such a large force lurking in their empire, who wouldn't guard against it? Coincidentally, a few disciples who had been arranged to help He Chuan prepare Hanshi powder and the guiding technique returned with the items in front of him. He Chuan took a quick look. According to the experience from his 2 previous lives, there was still a lot of room for improvement for the Hanshi powder and the guiding technique. After improvement, they might not be so-called pseudo-awakened after consuming them. This thought could not help but make He Chuan excited. If he could mass create the awakened, would it still be difficult to defend the city? The answer was no. Without saying anything else, he directly requested a quiet place from the dojo master, indicating his intention to comprehend the guiding technique. The dojo master was also very straightforward and gave up his own room. He also instructed that without He Chuan's request, no one was allowed to enter and disturb him. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. He Chuan did not eat for a few days in a row. He only drank some water and continued to carry out high-intensity deductions. Under such painstaking efforts, the optimized guiding technique was finally completed. As for the Hanshi powder, his body was unable to withstand the pressure and he had to rest for a while before he could continue. He Chuan brought the guidance technique to the dojo master for him to review. This is... At first, the dojo master didn't pay much attention to it and thought that He Chuan was simply returning it to him after reading it. However, after flipping through a few pages, he saw something completely different from what he remembered. What? What is this? A modified version of the guiding technique? Wait. What kind of cultivation method is this? How come I've never heard of it before? The dojo master's expression changed from calm to shock, then from shock to surprise, and finally to stupefaction. After a long while, he finally believed the truth. The guiding technique that had been leaked from the main dojo and claimed to be unchangeable in this generation had actually been modified by a teenager. Moreover, it was extremely perfect. It was several times stronger than the original guide technique. No. Several hundred times. Even though it was hard to believe, the truth was right before his eyes. He had only tried the cultivation method recorded in the book, and in an instant, he had ingested much more powerful spiritual energy than before. Such a performance was really too exaggerated and too surprising. He didn't understand. How could a young man who wasn't awakened be so capable? After thinking about it, he could only attribute it to the saying that talent between humans was different. At that moment, the dojo master had no choice but to pay attention to this young man. Upon hearing that he could improve the formula of Hanshi powder, without saying a word, he asked people to supply the extremely expensive and rare Hanshi powder to the maximum extent of consumption. Moreover, he gave up the alchemy room in the dojo that was exclusive to him, which no one ever set foot in before, for He Chuan to use. This kind of treatment was unprecedented. At first, there were some disciples in the dojo who were not convinced. But when the improved guiding technique was made public, their attitudes immediately changed 180 degrees. They directly transformed into He Chuan's guardians. They gave him food and drinks every day. If He Chuan encountered a trivial matter, they could immediately rush over and take care of it along the way. 2 days later, He Chuan brought the purified Hanqi powder out of the alchemy room and successfully awakened an ordinary person who had just entered the building and had not yet become a pseudo-awakened through the old channeling technique and Hanqi powder. Everyone was dumbfounded. What did they see? Hanqi powder and guiding technique could create an awakened? 77 Chapter 77. How is this possible? The dojo master's confused gaze kept wandering around He Chuan and the disciple who had just become awakened. His mind was a little confused. Was this real? Was he dreaming? When he saw the innate ability glow on the awakened disciple's body, the dojo master fell silent. He had to accept this fact silently. He didn't say a word. Looking at He Chuan, he couldn't help but feel dejected and defeated. Each generation was more powerful than the last. The dojo master didn't expect he had studied the awakening method for more than 10 years without making any progress. Today, it was done by a young man who had just come of age. In the end, it was still Sigh. How did he do it? The dojo master could no longer describe his feelings with words. Faced with such matters beyond his knowledge, it seemed that he did not even have the right to speak. He wanted to ask, but he was too embarrassed to ask. What if He Chuan said, "Is it difficult," and then explained a bunch of things that he did not understand? What should he do then? Pretend to understand when he doesn't? Forget it, forget it. Dignity was more critical. His face would look even uglier if he were exposed. The crowd was filled with exclamations. Many people had already gathered around He Chuan and asked him a few questions one after another. Everyone was concerned about whether people like them, who were pseudo-awakened, would have the chance to become awakened after taking the upgraded Hanqi powder and cultivating the modified guiding technique. He Chuan gave them the answer. No. He even imparted to them the cultivation method he had developed over the past few days. Whether it's an awakened or a pseudo-awakened, the difference is only reflected in the innate ability. In fact, the point is to rely on spiritual essence to improve oneself. Improve where? How to improve quickly? Many of you are confused about this, so much so that you are blindly strengthening your physical strength, trying to make a breakthrough in the simplest and most violent aspect. What about the result? Do you have a chance of winning if you meet an awakened? At this point, He Chuan swept his gaze across the crowd to see their reactions. Among the group of several hundred people, everyone had heavy expressions. Only a few of them had relaxed expressions. It seemed that they were the only lucky awakened in this dojo. They had never lost when sparring with others on a daily basis. He Chuan paid attention to this detail and instantly thought of more things. Looks like what I said is right. However, don't be too happy for the few awakened ones. I think using the same cultivation method as the pseudo-awakened ones to train your body without thinking is a complete waste of your talent. Immediately, the expressions of those few people became awkward. The feeling of being called out and criticized was really uncomfortable. But they had no way to refute. Who asked this man in front of them to use only a few days to refresh everyone's understanding? Whether it was improving the Hanqi powder formula or optimizing the guiding technique. Either of these two requirements, even if placed in the entire world, there might be no one who could achieve them. In the past, if someone brought up such a topic, everyone would only treat it as a fantasy. But now, such a legendary existence was standing before them, teaching them how to cultivate. Who dared to say anything more? Then, He Chuan slowly began to narrate. He poured everything that he could think of into everyone present. Everyone was silent, and the expression on their faces gradually became focused. Even the dojo master was abnormally engrossed in listening. He kept using his fingers to write on his palm as if he was taking notes. As someone who was ranked first in both strength and talent in the field, the dojo master had to admit that listening to He Chuan's words greatly benefited him. It was novel and impressive. In short, He Chuan divided the power level of this world into 9 sections, starting with 1 and the highest being 9. With each increase in level, the power level would be 5 times stronger than in the previous section. After some multiplication, the power could reach nearly 400,000 times. It was said to be the limit that this world could bear. Thus, a level 1 awakened was no different from an ant in front of a level 9 awakened. And people who cultivated by absorbing spiritual energy were generally divided into 2 types: martial cultivators and spiritual cultivators. These were 2 branches of cultivation. As the name implied, the former cultivated martial arts and specialized in the physical body. The latter specialized in the control of spiritual energy and specialized in innate abilities. It sounded like these were the pseudo-awakened and the awakened in the past. However, in reality, the awakened in the past were not specialized. They loved to increase the strength of their physical bodies. It was as though if their bodies did not have strong muscles, they could not protect themselves. As a result, the strength of innate abilities did not increase for a long time. What's more, even the way he used it was wrong. For example, in the dojo, an awakened managed to crystallize his body. He was directly used as a negative example and was dragged onto the stage for a demonstration. Originally, this person used the crystallized part as a shield to resist the damage. However, He Chuan had taught him how to use the crystallized part to refract light and achieve the effect of invisibility. Other than that, he could also gather the intensity of the light and shine it on the eyes, instantly blinding the other party. From He Chuan's tone, this was still the way to use it at the initial stage. When his control ability improved and his crystallized body reached 100%, there would be even more miraculous derivative abilities. To be more precise, it was the way to use it. This was a path that the awakened one had never thought of. It was to the extent that it instantly transformed him into He Chuan's die-hard fans. They followed behind and asked questions crazily. There were 2 other awakened in the hall, and they weren't too different either. It was as if they were seeing this world for the first time, and there were countless questions to ask. The remaining pseudo-awakened were also eager to give it a try. They were also very eager to learn. As martial cultivators, could they possess the power to contend against the spiritual cultivators? When He Chuan was free, he gave this group of people an accurate answer. Yes. The pinnacle of martial arts was to become immortal and shatter the void. At that time, even if spiritual cultivators possessed the power to destroy planets, they wouldn't be able to cause any harm to this kind of martial cultivator. Of course, that was a power that could only be possessed in higher dimensional worlds. He Chuan only gave out this idea to let everyone long for it. Hence, the reincarnation mark also gave a precious notification because of his teaching. Gaining a rich life experience, evaluation points has been increased. 78 Chapter 78. Although the improvement this time wasn't much. But for He Chuan, it was the first step to opening the door to a new world. He believed that in the near future, when more people accepted his theory, it would usher in an even greater wave of gains. At that moment, after settling the matter at hand, He Chuan didn't plan to stay any longer and prepared to lead his troops back to Glory City. The dojo master wanted him to stay for 2 more days to discuss his cultivation experience. However, He Chuan rejected him with the beast tied as a reason. The dojo master had nothing to say. He generously asked his disciple to bring out another batch of hanshi powder. After modifying it according to the new formula, he passed it to He Chuan. He Chuan did not stand on ceremony. He had mixed a lot of private goods into his improved guiding technique. It incorporated many of the subtleties of the tyrannical true cultivation manual. Getting some resources wasn't a big deal. After the dojo master sent He Chuan off, he stood at the door and looked around for a long time before sighing slightly. This favor can't be repaid. The stronger a person was, the more they didn't like to owe others a favor. It was easy to become obsessed during cultivation, causing one to feel depressed and unable to break through. The dojo master's thoughts changed slightly, and he suddenly thought it through. Wouldn't it be okay if he just handed over the Hanshi powder and the guiding technique to the main hall? This wasn't a favor that he alone owed. It's time to go back. The beast tide is just around the corner. Although this place is remote, it might not be safe. At this moment, a horn sounded from the edge of the cliff. The army was about to leave. His gaze was deep as he looked in that direction. The thought of taking He Chuan away suddenly appeared in his mind. Every 2 seconds, he shook his head gently. He Chuan did not hold anything back from them and taught them everything. Such a selfless person would not let the people of Glory City be in danger. Little friend He Chuan, I wish you a safe journey. I'll see you again when you come back. In the blink of an eye, the army passed through the Gobi Desert and returned to the mountain forest. Once again, they were divided into smaller groups. On the way back, He Chuan paid attention to his surroundings while recounting his gains from this trip. After reading the guidance technique, he got the inspiration and felt he could perfect the tyrannical true cultivation manual and allow it to be spread and used to cultivate in this world. Perhaps he could even awaken and obtain an innate ability to play with. It didn't matter if he didn't awaken it. Once he had the strength, there would be no restrictions on his travel. At that time, he would be able to do even more things. Your Highness! At this moment, Lin Cheng and Su Ke rushed over from behind and caught up with the team. They arrived at He Chuan's left and right sides. The two of them looked at each other and hesitated. He Chuan stared straight ahead and asked casually, "Did you mess up?" Su Ke scratched his head, "Not really. You asked the soldiers to record the terrain around the city as much as possible. However, after they come and go twice, many places have not been explored. I'm afraid it will be difficult to make the sandbox." "No worries." He Chuan waved his hand gently. "It's good that you have a general idea. Treat the empty spots as a gathering place for the beasts to guard against. After the magic cannons are produced, it will be easier to deploy the cannons in the city defense area. Sigh, it's just that the sacrifices are a little too big. I'm afraid that more than 1,000 people have been killed in this exploration." Lin Cheng sighed, looking a little pained. He Chuan didn't say anything. Lin Ye, who was standing at the side, suddenly frowned and said, "Brother, these sacrifices are all for the future. The magic cannons are extremely heavy, and moving them in the middle of a battle is impossible. If we don't set up defenses in advance, the losses will be even greater." "That's not what I mean." He Chuan's voice was calm, "I'm not asking a few people to sacrifice for the majority of people. It's just that there's no way to avoid the sacrifice on the road to salvation. Those who were merciful don't fit to be generals. I don't want to tell you such a simple principle in person. Do you understand?" Lin Cheng was shocked. "Your subordinate is muddle-headed. I hope your Highness will not blame me." He Chuan did not care about this. If Lin Cheng were not a kind person, he would not have fought alongside him. Su Ke came out at the right time to change the topic and mediate the atmosphere. He asked about what happened to He Chuan in the dojo. This question was excellent. He Chuan's answer shocked them. Modified Hanshi powder. Improved the guidance technique. It could create an awakened that was out of reach in their minds. All of this seemed like a fantasy. No one could accept it in a short period of time. Even reason told them that they could not trust He Chuan's words. But He Chuan had no reason to lie to them. Thus, he held on to the hope of becoming awakened. Su Ke asked expectantly, "Your Highness, as long as you take the Hanshi powder and use the guidance technique, can you really become an awakened?" "Ah, no, become a spiritual cultivator." As soon as he said this, the soldiers at the side pricked up their ears to listen. An awakened. This temptation was unusually great. Not necessarily. He Chuan shook his head and said, "Although it has been optimized, it only makes the awakening possible. In fact, the probability is not high. Then, if we fail, won't we only be able to walk the path of martial cultivators? Su Kei's excitement seemed to have dropped a lot. That's too brutal. It doesn't seem to suit me. Look at how beautiful you look. Lin Cheng had just offended He Chuan, and he was eager to have a chance to make up for his mistake. He immediately said, "This Hanshi powder was brought back by His Highness. How can it be yours?" Su Kei laughed, "I'm just saying. It's okay. If you want to be awakened, you'll have a chance when we get back." He Chuan patted his shoulder, "After we get to the city, boil these medicines into a pot and let the people and soldiers in the city choose to take it." Su Kei was shocked. "Your Highness, this Hanshi powder is so precious. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a rare treasure. I heard that even if you take it repeatedly, it will still have an effect. Are you sure you don't want to keep it for your use and want to distribute it?" "Yes, but before distributing it, remember to clarify that the possibility of awakening to spiritual cultivators is not high. Let them think it over carefully." He Chuan did not say too much. This Hanshi powder was too low grade for him. You couldn't even compare it to the gene reagent from his first life, so he had no interest in taking it. Why not increase the strength of the lower city defense so that everyone had the possibility of becoming awakened? At the same time, he could also get a wave of rewards for distributing his wealth. Hearing such an answer, Lin Cheng and Lin Ye, the siblings, Su Kei, and even the surrounding marshals and soldiers were all stunned. Just how selfless was the city lord? He was able to unconditionally give such a precious thing to everyone to use together. Was he not feeling distressed? 79 Chapter 79. Time always passes by unintentionally. He Chuan and the others returned to Glory City another day later. In the blink of an eye, the anticipated day of the Beast Tide was getting closer and closer. As a result, the citizens' emotions in the city became increasingly depressed. Unease, panic, nervousness, and many other negative emotions enveloped people's hearts. Facing a powerful, strange beast, they didn't have any ability to resist. It was also at this time Su Kei followed He Chuan's orders and began distributing the Hanshi powder. He set up a new tent in front of the city lord's residence. He brewed medicinal soup and distributed notices. He let everyone in the city know. The city lord gave them a chance to choose their fate. To become an awakened one. To fight for freedom. This slogan made everyone excited. For a moment, people came in an endless stream. Although most people didn't have the luck and could only walk the path of martial cultivators. But to them, this result was already 1,000 or 10,000 times better than before. A few people who successfully awakened an innate ability were even more grateful to He Chuan. After obtaining great power, a large group gathered outside the city lord's manor, wanting to help He Chuan defend the city. Facing such a request, He Chuan naturally wouldn't reject it. He directly added them to the new legion and placed them under his control. To further increase the battle strength of the new legion, he even distributed all the weapons in the city lord's manor. However, too many people had taken the Hanshi powder. The total number of the new legion's soldiers was 3,000, no less than the White Tiger Legion. The weapons stored in the storage weren't enough for them to distribute. We still have to find the rebate. He Chuan's train of thought was apparent. With a large number of martial cultivators, the difficulty of finding the rebate would also be reduced. As long as they formed groups of 3 to 5 people, they would basically have a chance of winning if they didn't encounter groups of strange beasts in the wild. He immediately called over a few squad leaders of the new legion and asked them to cooperate with the group of people who went out to do their daily operations. Not long after, they did indeed gain something. A group of militia digging trenches found a black iron vein that was accompanied by fine gold. This was even more precious than the raw materials of the previous batch of new equipment. Obviously, this was another reward for returning the money. Although the items were precious, they were not of much use to He Chuan. There were no blacksmiths in the city. No matter how precious the black iron refined gold ore was, it was just a pile of glowing stones. He Chuan had no choice but to try to find a solution through the deduction system. Unfortunately, he was disappointed again. The black iron refined gold was too complicated. It required a lot of time to analyze and calculate. With his current physical condition, it would take him at least 10 days to half a month to get the results. Thus, He Chuan directly changed the direction. He wholeheartedly devoted himself to deducting the tyrannical true cultivation manual. He had already thought of this before. Therefore, it didn't take much effort. One day and one night later, not only did he successfully complete the tyrannical true cultivation manual, but he also absorbed the spiritual chi that belonged to this world. After that, he completely integrated the middle and lower volume, and his strength soared. Now, when he started cultivating, he already had the strength equivalent to a first-rate martial artist of the previous world. It was indeed an exaggeration. Moreover, He Chuan had yet to become an awakened one and had the ability to control spiritual cultivation. Even if a united with the nature realm martial artist came, he would probably be killed in an instant by him. As a result, what you asked was what you'll get. Just as he was about to cultivate the contents of the upper volume of the tyrannical true cultivation manual, he suddenly felt a mysterious and enigmatic aura. Immediately after, he could not help but fall into a state close to an epiphany. He didn't know how much time had passed. When he regained his senses, He Chuan shockingly discovered that he could already control flames. What was even more impressive was that the spiritual energy in his body had increased dozens of times in an instant, and he couldn't help but vent his raging power. Could it be that I've awakened? Is this my innate ability? He Chuan didn't have any experience, nor did he have any references that he could learn from. He could only rely on analysis to judge. According to the power system he had created, he was currently at the level of a level 2 awakened. He might be a little stronger, but he definitely couldn't reach level 3. He wasn't just a little weaker than the dojo master of the Wuji dojo. However, he had already surpassed the peak of his previous life. There shouldn't be any problems with the deduction now. He Chuan closed his eyes again. After his strength increased, his physical fitness also improved further. Especially his brain power. It didn't take him long to get the result of the deduction. It turned out that for him, the difficulty of forging a weapon with black iron adamantine was not because he didn't have a blacksmith but because he didn't have enough heat to melt the black iron ore's flame and the forging technique. As long as he had both, whether martial or spiritual cultivators, they could use this material to forge equipment. Moreover, it could withstand a certain amount of spiritual energy without damage. It was much more powerful than the equipment made by ordinary blacksmiths. Coincidentally, in the knowledge he had obtained in school, the ability to control fire that he had just awakened was usually used to strengthen himself and forge weapons. After one of the prerequisites for forging weapons was resolved, only the art of forging iron was left. Unfortunately, there was no way to know where to obtain it through deduction. After thinking about it, he could only ask the erudite dojo master to see if he had anything related to it. He Chuan had always been a hands-on person. Basically, he would not let others do things for him that he could do on his own to avoid forming the habit of laziness. Thus, he went out personally. He went to the Wuji dojo alone. However, when he arrived at his destination, he discovered that the place was already empty. There were no signs of a fight nearby. It seemed that they had left on their own. He Chuan climbed over the courtyard wall and went inside to search. He did not find anything of value. Instead, he saw an envelope pressed under a teacup in the main hall. The gist of the letter was the beast tide was about to arrive. So, the people in the dojo moved to Freedom City to avoid disaster. If the visitors were interested in visiting the dojo or had something to ask, they could go to the inns or taverns in Freedom City to look for them. Looks like I have to make a trip to Freedom City. He Chuan thought for a moment, then returned to the house in the backyard and rummaged through a set of pure black clothes. After disguising himself as a swordsman who had traveled worldwide, he left the dojo and walked towards Freedom City. He had to keep a low profile. His eldest brother was now the crown prince in the capital. He should have taken control of cities around Glory City and was waiting for him to walk into a trap at any time. At that time, he might make use of the situation to make a fuss and execute him for disobeying the orders of the imperial decree and not staying in Glory City. Such a method was reasonable and legal. No one would have any objections. There would not be any waves at all. 80 Chapter 80. He Chuan knew too well the intrigue of the royal family. He did not need the help of the deduction system to avoid these risks. Freedom City was located to the west of Glory City. It was close to the border and had to cross the Gobi Desert. This distance was not considered far for an awakened like He Chuan. As long as he put the spiritual energy to his feet, he could significantly increase his traveling speed. It was estimated that within 1 to 2 hours, he would be able to cover half a day's journey for an ordinary person. However, what surprised He Chuan was that there were many traces of human activity in the Gobi Desert in the middle of winter. Following these traces, he took a closer look and realized they were actually familiar faces. Azure Dragon Army. The awakened ones had powerful perceptive abilities. They could hear what these people were saying from a great distance. He Chuan originally did not intend to care about them. Who would have thought? He suddenly heard the Azure Dragon Marshal talking about him. It's all that kid He Chuan's fault. Would there be so much trouble if he hadn't been demoted to Glory City? Another voice sounded a little submissive as he probed, "Sir, there's only half a day's rations left in the army. What should we do? What should we do? What do you want me to do?" The Azure Dragon Marshal sounded very angry. Who would have thought that the Crown Prince would kill us? Can you imagine that? Hey! Sir, since ancient times, the royal family has always been fickle in favor. Even if we can't disobey the Crown Prince's orders, we have to leave a way out before we trip He Chuan. Way out? Now even Freedom City has our bounty on it. Where else can we go? The Azure Dragon Marshal was fuming. The Crown Prince has already made a plan. After we incite our Azure Dragon Legion to leave Glory City, he will pin the crime of treason on us and turn us into rats in the street. Everyone wants to step on us. Sir, I do have an idea. Don't dawdle. Hurry up and say it. The beast tide is approaching. After we leave Glory City, the city's defenses will be empty. As long as you are willing to put down your ego and tell He Chuan everything was ordered by the Crown Prince, there might still be a chance. Scram! If I go back now, how will the soldiers look at me? How will they lead the troops in the future? Besides, do you think he is a fool? Will he believe such words? Sir, think about it. We are indeed rats in the street, but how good can He Chuan be? Isn't he also alone? Whether he believes it or not, if we said we want to protect Glory City, he still has to rely on us. As he spoke, the man's voice paused. After we survive the beast tide, won't Glory City be yours? Do you really want me to rebel? The Azure Dragon Marshal thought for a long time before he said the second half of his sentence. Do you know that this is a crime that implicates the 9 generations? It affects the entire family. But isn't that the crime that you are now carrying? Whether it's true or false, what's the difference? Wang Cheng, you have to be clear. The Crown Prince saying we're conspiring against him is just putting a cap on it. If we return to the capital and confess, at most, we'll be considered deserters and be imprisoned for a few years. Sir, can we still return? The tent fell into a short silence. It seemed that the Azure Dragon Marshal was also struggling with this problem. When He Chuan heard this, the corners of his mouth had already curled up slightly. Everything turned out to be a trap the Crown Prince had secretly dug for him. He wanted to make Glory City's defensive troops insufficient so that he would be dead in the mouth of the beast. No wonder Green Dragon's Marshal had agreed so readily at that time. He did not hesitate at all. Unfortunately, he had also been plotted against by the crown prince now. He could not go anywhere and only struggled for his life in the wilderness. He had initially wanted to rob the dojo to extend their life, but he had stumbled upon it by chance. As the old saying goes, it was cutting off one's nose to spite one's face. Speaking of which, this big brother was quite ruthless in doing things. In order to make him lose the chance to go back and fight for the throne, he could push all the people in Glory City to die with him. He had to be said to be very bold. He was a person who could do great things. Unfortunately, his methods were a little dark. They were too dirty. At this moment, the Azure Dragon Marshal and Deputy General also walked out of the tent. They had just discussed and decided. Return to Glory City. On the surface, they pretended to surrender. After they survived the beast tide, they would stab He Chuan from the back and occupy Glory City. Then, they would use this as capital to defect to other countries. This plan was a little too big. Although Glory City was located in a mountain range, its strategic location was essential. As long as they occupied this place, they could cut off the communication between Freedom City and the Imperial Court, turning Freedom City into an isolated island. Freedom City was such a huge piece of meat. It was impossible for the two countries bordering it and currently at war not to know about it. The war maniacs and ambitious people would not let go of such an opportunity. If Green Dragon's Marshal succeeded, they might be able to escape from the predicament and escape the trap set by the Crown Prince. Unfortunately, He Chuan had heard it. This plan was doomed to fail. After thinking about it, He Chuan did not alert the enemy. He had initially planned to destroy the Azure Dragon Legion, but he temporarily let them go because he was not strong enough. Now that these people were rushing to Glory City to die, he naturally would not stop them. But at this moment, an accident happened. A monstrous beast cry suddenly sounded in the direction of Glory City in the east. He Chuan couldn't help but frown. Could it be that the beast tide had begun? No, it had only been half a month. The strange beasts could still find food in the forest. It was impossible for them to leave their territory so quickly. There must be another reason. He turned his gaze and looked around. Then, he saw an intersection of the White Mountain Range that blocked the Gobi Desert had collapsed. Avalanche? As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he saw countless large-scale strange beasts fleeing on the horizon, trying to escape this disaster. But he didn't expect that the disaster would come again and again. Soon after, a powerful tremor came from under his feet. For a moment, the mountain shook, and the earth trembled. The fragile layer of rocks was shattered under the impact of this natural energy. Even the earth was torn apart. That's it for this batch of chapters. If you enjoyed the story, stick around for more. Subscribe and join me in exploring even more light novel worlds. Have a favorite novel you'd love to hear? Share your suggestions, and you might see them in the listener's choice section. See you in the next one.